You're coming in here and saying these things are essential to liberalism. And I keep asking you, how? Show me the causal connection. You're going, 300 years ago, a guy talked about this. And I'm going, you need to do a little better than that, okay? Now you're calling me insincere. Carl, this is so bad faith.
Well,
I hate to say it, but it's totally bad faith.
How is it bad faith? And you're saying you can hold a philosophy
it is bad faith
without believing any of its fucking tenets, mate.
Like, it's a totally authoritarian move what you're doing here, Carl. You're basically saying you have to buy into what I am saying, otherwise you're an insincere liar.
Hey now, it's your boy PSA Sitch here with another Tuesday show and everyone's favorite, the day after America's birthday. I hope everyone's good and hungover from a day of celebrating and partying, the beginning and the end of history, America. And to celebrate that, we're joined by everyone's second favorite American, Adam Frandid, and everyone's favorite proto-American, Carl Sargon of Akkad. How are you doing, Carl?
I'm good. How are you?
Great.
I said before we started that you must have spent all yesterday just sipping alcohol, being so sad that your favorite son, America, left home and just never came back.
You know what? It'd be wonderful if that were the case, but unfortunately, America pollutes Britain more than any other country in the world. So, you know.
It's true. We left the nest and then became so popular that now you guys have to copy us.
Well, I mean, inventing critical race theory and exporting it to us
Listen,
is one way of, you know.
It can't always all be good, all right? Some bad ideas come out, all right? Okay, anyway, what are we doing today, Adam? What's happening?
We are doing a talk about, Carl wrote an article, the 5 problems with liberalism. Carl,
5 false assumptions of liberalism.
5 false assumptions of liberalism, yes. Can you share a link with us in the chat and I can pull it up here? We were supposed to, we got a little scheduling conflict mix up, so we're actually starting an hour early. So
I have it here.
Apologize for the. Okay, good. Did you send it to me on Twitter?
Yeah, there you go.
So, and I don't want this to be like a contentious dialogue. You've come on the Sunday show a few times, Carl, and it has gotten a little contentious. So I did a bunch
do some internet blood sports. That'd be fun.
Yes.
Well, I mean, if that's totally necessary, I guess. I mean, so I'm going to put Carl Benjamin and lotuseaters.com as your tag. Is that good? I mean, I want to credit you appropriately. Fun. So
you don't want to put like right-wing fascists on the...
Don't. Sitch, when you say that...
He knows that fascism's left-wing.
People don't know. Listen, we're in the very beginning of the video. This video is going to get demonetized. And look, this happened with the Jesse, like we did a bunch of, your transphobic jokes in the beginning of that video. And that video got hit with hate speech. That video got hit with everything in the book, like hate speech. Jesus. Yeah. That's not good for the channel. So.
This is a comedy show, Adam. I'll not sacrifice the comedy for YouTube's sake.
I'm just saying.
You square.
There's serious portions of the show, and then there's the comedy portions of the show. So
okay.
Should have just explained to YouTube as a comedy show. Christ.
Yeah.
Well, we put it in the fucking thumbnail.
You took the quotes out of the thumbnail. You fuck.
Listen. I told you already. Let's not get sidetracked on the quotes thing, okay? We have important things to talk about. Carl is only on for a thing, and I didn't do it deliberately. I told you how it works. I pull up the last file, and if it has the quotes in it, it has it. If it doesn't, it doesn't. So we got the 5 false assumptions.
Did you have your plushie make out with your cat or something?
Let's talk about the
It has cat hair all over it.
Can we talk about the topic, Sitch?
Okay, we can talk about
Carl is only here for an hour, so you're being very disrespectful to Carl's time.
Well, I can do like an hour and a half or so.
Well, he says that, and then 3 hours later, we're still arguing. I know how this works.
I've got to go to work tomorrow, so I don't want to be too
okay.
So we've got the 5 false assumptions of liberalism here, and you've got them laid out. You've got 1 is pre-social man in a state of nature. Number 2 is everyone is equal. And I'm kind of going to try to just steel man your argument here to get us going. So number 3 is the universal man. Number 4 is the blank slate. And number 5 is equality of opportunity. So you're basically saying that these are all untrue assumptions that is
Yep.
baked into liberalism. And I had a little back and forth with you in DMs as well, and you're saying that it's the liberal psychology and also the liberal ideology or philosophy, whichever term you want to use, right? Obviously, you use ideology if you're talking down to somebody, and philosophy if it's your own personal belief. So
If you respect them, yeah.
so okay, so we're in agreement there. But my big contention with this is that I don't understand the technical aspect of the argument that you're making here. And in the article, you don't necessarily have like a in conclusion. I feel that you're saying that, in order for an ideology to work, it has to be based on true assumptions. And I don't, first of all, I don't agree with that, because there are plenty of ideologies that are based on false assumptions and seem to work for people. I would, as an atheist, I don't believe in God, but I do think Christianity facilitates a kind of belief system that is generally creates pro-social, honest, not stealing,
Okay.
not murdering type people. So
Okay, so let's start with this one then, because I think that people do have a true belief in Christianity, Christians.
I think
And-
so too. Okay.
Yeah, and so I don't think you can cynically say, well, this just has good outcomes and therefore we'll believe it even though it's not real, because then it's not really sincere belief. And so you have an understanding that you're not pursuing the truth. And I don't think many people are content to live that way. And I don't think that works. And I think anything that comes along and claims it is the truth in the face of what you're saying will actually win.
Okay. Well, that's
but wait, but Adam's not saying that Christians don't believe in Christianity. He's saying that just you can have a philosophy that's not necessarily based on objective reality and it still produce a pro-social society.
Yeah, but the point is that people who are Christians genuinely believe it is.
Yeah, they believe it, sure.
Yeah,
right.
So, but the thing is, you can't then say that's not reality. All you can really say is you don't believe that's reality.
Well,
I'm not sure I follow, but are you saying that because like liberals don't believe in the assumptions of liberalism, and is that the difference?
Well, it's more that they're just not true assumptions. They don't, and no time has been spent analyzing them, and any time spent analyzing them reveals them to be false. And this is a problem if you want a reality, a philosophy that maps onto reality, which I'm sure we all do. So that's something I think has to be addressed.
So I have two counter arguments. I think first, before we move on to those, it would be helpful to bring up the concept, Brett Weinstein's concept of metaphorical truth. Do you know this concept?
Well, I mean, I can gather what it is from just the name of it.
Okay, so it's...
Something's true in a sense, but not literally true.
Exactly, yes. It's an evolutionary way to look at truth. And this is the heart of the Sam Harris, Jordan Peterson podcast from ages ago when they were arguing over truth. Peterson is basically, making a case for metaphorical truth. And Weinstein lays it out much clearer than Peterson. Weinstein says there are belief systems that if you believe them, even though they are untrue, you will be in a better position evolutionarily. Your fitness will be improved by believing these things. I think Christianity falls into that camp. I don't believe that there is a God, but I think believing in a God that will, take care of your enemies and equal out the scales of injustice in the world ultimately at some point in time helps people who have experienced injustice not dwell on it, move on. I think forgiveness is a meme that is pro-social for society. And I don't necessarily know how you get that forgiveness meme into society without something like Christianity. So that's, go ahead.
Okay, so, I mean, either way, that's still you admitting you're upholding a lie. And I think that it's insincere. And I think most people actually don't want to lead insincere lives. And I don't think that it's possible for people to pretend that it's good or authentic to not pursue the truth. I think people have got a kind of natural desire to pursue the truth. And when people genuinely believe something, then that's when the magic works. The magic doesn't work if they don't genuinely believe something.
Well, I think, yes, I think true belief in something is where the magic happens. And I think people find a lot of meaning in life pursuing things that they find to be factually true about the world. But I don't necessarily, when I look at people from the outside, and I mean, we can pick someone like gender queer, feminists. I don't think what they're pursuing is true to the world, but I think they believe it's true to the world.
Yeah, they think it's true.
Right. So that it provides meaning in their lives, but we from the outside perspective. So it's funny that we're well, not really funny, but it's pertinent.
Though, on that, they wouldn't believe it if they didn't think it was true. It's the fact that they think it's true that allows them to pursue it and believe it. Right. And so, but that's the thing. So I don't think a liberal order can sustain if it doesn't also believe that what it's saying is true.
But the thing is, it can believe it's true.
Yeah, but
without it actually being true.
Yeah, sure. And that's the big problem with truth, isn't it? Is whether what we actually know to be true or not. But the problem is any amount of rational analysis of the liberal assumptions shows that we don't believe that they're true. So that's a problem.
Because people won't necessarily buy into them. But there is
it's just because they're so obviously not true.
There is a epistemology though to liberalism. So I went through. This is the thing, because if you're making an argument, and I feel like you're trying to make the argument that liberalism has failed, and these are the reasons why.
No, I'm trying to make the argument that we can't sincerely believe in the origins of liberalism, because the origins of liberalism are based on false assumptions that came from like the 17th and 18th centuries. 300 years later, we know these things not to be true, and so we have to reassess this. And that's what the critical race theorists have done, as I'm sure Sitch already knows. That's basically what they spent the 20th century doing, the late 20th century doing. And so, essentially, they have won and have overthrown liberalism because of the faulty assumptions that liberalism was based on. And so now we, the liberals, have to go back and go, okay, well, what is it that they're right about? What are the criticisms of liberalism and the false assumptions within it that are true? And the thing is, I've got another article coming, because there are more false assumptions that underpin liberalism. In addition to these ones.
So I went through and I tried to think up, okay, what is the core beliefs of liberalism? And when I do that, they don't necessarily match up with what you're trying to debunk. Some of them do. So can I go through these? I shared them in the chat,
before we do, right? So I'm speaking specifically to the Enlightenment thinkers and how they viewed liberalism, right? And so the foundations upon which it's built. So I'd like to stick with that, because like any kind of like post hoc rationalization of it seems a bit hollow.
Well, I'm doing this to avoid an argument that we're just talking about two different definitions of liberalism. So I really have to lay out the definition.
Well, I'm talking about liberalism as defined by people like Locke and Rousseau.
Well, then let's just go through these and we'll see if that matches up with your assessment. I mean, I asked you specifically in DMs, and then you had said this is a liberalism that I'm talking about. So
yeah, but what you're essentially trying to do is, and I've seen you do this plenty of times, is essentially to sort of move the goalposts. So I'm not really kicking your liberalism, right? So what this is.
Well, no, this is not my liberalism. Though. This is the liberalism.
Well, that's the thing. The liberalism is built on these pillars that I've addressed in this article. So I really don't want to move away from that. I'd really like to talk about these, because frankly, liberalism does have to change. It does have to change because it's not correct. And if we want sincere beliefs in something that is correct, it can't be liberalism.
So then let's look at these things as the things that I think are working in liberalism and we have to preserve.
Well, wait. I thought my understanding was that, Carl, that your position was that you just want to replace the false assumptions of liberalism with, with correct, objectively true, foundational ideas. but
then you
that
have a
those
problem.
ideas would still, build a liberal society or something
Well,
that looks like a liberal society.
No, it'd be a post-liberal society.
Okay.
The thing is, whatever you replace the faulty foundations of liberalism with, will change the nature of liberalism. So it won't be liberalism anymore. It'll be a post-liberal philosophy, right? But I think that's a good thing. It's like we don't want to have, communism or fascism, right? We
Sure.
don't want those things.
Right.
And so,
Well, listen, I have number 4 here, property rights. Obviously, if property rights is an essential component of liberalism, we won't have...
Hold on. Okay, so we might... This
that's
probably
not one of
be
the faulty assumptions.
right. This will probably be... Okay, so the post-liberalism conversation would probably be its own conversation in the future, because I feel like that's a long thing. So, but to get back to what's going on between the two of you, I think basically what Sargon is saying is that, like, it's kind of the example you brought up in the beginning, Adam, about Christianity. Like, it'd be like Carl saying, oh, the foundational belief that, Jesus is a savior or whatever, or that existed, that's false. And then Adam is saying, well, whether Jesus existed or not is irrelevant. All that matters is that people are following the belief system passed down, through the church, and then that's leading to pro-social outcomes. But the problem is that Carl is saying, but wait a minute, if you remove Jesus from the equation, then people don't have a real reason to actually follow the teachings of Christianity, the teachings of the church, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's why he's focusing on these assumptions of liberalism, because he's saying that basically that, Adam, you want to follow liberalism without the seed that basically the axiom that tells people why they should be liberal in the first place.
Well, I disagree.
Hang on.
I disagree with his seeds being relevant.
Well, they are relevant though. That's the thing. This
is the first I've ever encountered them, and I consider myself a dyed-in-the-wool liberal. So, I mean, how?
To be honest, though, how much liberal theory have you read?
This is the disconnect that we're having here. It doesn't matter if someone teaches me the value of property rights, not through a philosophical lens, but through a scientific lens, and I adopt that understanding of the value of property rights because I've read Why Nations Fail. It doesn't matter what the seed of it was, because I believe it because it is true.
Yeah, well, the thing is, property rights is a value, not a truth, right?
Okay.
Well, that's something we value. It's not an objective fact about the world. It comes into being because we make it come into being.
It seems
because we value it, right? And so, it seems odd.
It seems odd. It seems odd that you don't want me to make my argument, Carl.
I thought
you're like not even really letting me make my argument.
Well, no, it is this kind of. I was listening to Jordan Peterson was talking to Dave Rubin, and it was an interesting conversation. And Jordan Peterson said that part of the problems that conservatives have is like defending an idea of something like marriage, because humans have basically, humans have been practicing the practice of marriage for so long that like we've forgotten the ideas of why it's good, and it's just kind of been baked in and assumed that it's good on its face.
That's a great point.
And I think it's kind of the same thing with liberalism in a lot of liberal countries. And you could say this is a problem, and maybe it is a problem when it comes to like debating the theories of woke Marxism, but that people that live in liberal countries have kind of forgotten the principles and reasons for why liberalism is good, and they just, because they've been living it, just assume on its face that it's good.
Right, and there are different ways to get to those conclusions. Like, I'm more scientifically minded, so I'm looking for materialist answers to these questions.
But the problems that we're facing are caused by materialism, right?
Well, from a Marxist materialism, not materialism.
No, just any materialism. Like a lack of ideas.
No, I mean theological materialism, Sitch, not Marx.
Well, just any kind of philosophical materialism is it's what's poisoning our civilization, because we've lost the
Carl,
ability.
can I please just make my argument? I mean, it would be nice. I brought
Sorry,
you're allowed to make your argument. Well, I brought up this. I brought up this stuff.
I thought you had made it.
No, listen, I have here. I have basically deconstructed the essential beliefs of liberalism. And there's many different ways that you can get to these essential beliefs, but I think this is the core belief of liberalism. And if you don't accept that this is the core belief of liberalism, then we're talking about two different liberalisms, and we're just talking past one another.
Well, what do you feel is the core belief of liberalism?
So individual rights is obviously the bedrock of liberalism. The individual and freedom of speech is number two, and the purpose of that is conflict resolution through persuasion instead of violence.
Okay.
And the negation of that is obviously like CRT or queer theory. Those are pushing against that fundamental belief, where that's where you and I both have a problem with CRT, is that it's trying to attack that essential part of society. There's three, equal protection under the law, which you kind of mention in your article a bit. And the origin of that, I admit, is Protestantism, from my understanding, and it comes from equal in the eyes of God. So we thank the Christians that they gave us that idea. I have internalized it, and I don't necessarily need a God, but I know that God is helpful for a lot of people in accepting that equal in the eyes of God, equal protection under the law. And the negation of that is the neo-reactionaries or the CRT communities who don't believe in equal protection under the law. Property rights.
I don't know if that's fair to the neo-reactionary.
Okay,
I don't
well,
think any of them would be
Academic
arguing
Agent
against
is welcome
equality
to
under the
come
law.
on at any time and defend himself. So
Okay, so let's
let me just get through all of them, okay, and then we can go back to
okay.
them. And I put them in the chat. The numbers didn't come out, but property rights is a bedrock assumption. Obviously, the purpose of that is to motivate a technological innovation cycle. The negation of that is socialism or communism. So those are attacking liberal ideas. Tolerance of conflicting beliefs. And the purpose of that is to create laboratories of moral system innovation. And the negation of that is the neo-reactionaries and the critical race theorists. And Islam is also against that. Obviously, you've had a problem with that in Great Britain. So, and the sixth one and final one is knowledge is based on evidence. And the purpose of that is to create an overarching system to mediate between multiple belief systems. And the negation of that is divine revelation, critical race theory, and standpoint theory, which is basically, I believe this because, someone whispered in my ear and told it to me. So that's my understanding of the core of liberalism. I left something out. Let me know if you think there's an important one that I did leave out. So I don't see technically how your article is. I mean, your article seems to not really fight against any of these ideas.
Okay, well, I can explain it, right? So let's take individual rights.
Okay.
Right? Why should we believe that?
Okay, so you're talking about the foundation of why we should believe it. Well, I would say
essentially what the list you've given me there, right? It's as if you're looking at an illuminated room and you're looking at the light bouncing off the walls. You can see the walls and you like the color of the walls, but for some reason you're not prepared to talk about the.
No, I'll give you a
light,
justification. Right? I'll give you a justification, no problem.
But why should we value that?
Well, the justification that I would give is that we have a lot of different nations that are competing both socially and economically. And if we look at those nations, the nations that maximize individual rights seem to have the most wealth and prosperity of other nations among the nations. So I would say just empirically, we have evidence that maximizing individual rights will lead to wealth and prosperity.
But what if I actually don't care whether it leads to wealth or prosperity, and I'm concerned whether it's right or wrong?
Well, I mean, obviously, that would be a different conversation. So, like, if you're saying that you need a different justification for different people, I accept that. So, what is your justification for individual rights through your philosophical framework?
The thing is, right, essentially what you've done is crafted an argument that could be used to justify slavery, right? It could be, if it could be shown that slavery was actually really economically viable, then, well, I mean, I guess if we want to be prosperous and compete with other nations, it's okay to have slaves. And
it's a good thing.
Hang on, Adam, right? So the question isn't, whether something has a good consequence, right? Lots of things have good consequences. That's not an issue, really. It's actually quite difficult not to get a good consequence out of something. But the issue is whether something is intrinsically morally correct and whether it's true, right? So the question is actually one of values. It's one that comes a priori. It comes before we interface with the world, and it comes before the consequences are manifested. What would be right and wrong? And so to do this, hang on. To come to this conclusion, the original liberals came to the idea that, we're all created in God's image. We're all the children of God, and therefore it rests on these Christian foundations, right? People like John Locke thought atheism should be outlawed, right? They didn't think it would be possible to be a moral person if you're not a Christian. Now, are you a Christian? The answer is no. So the original liberals would turn around and say, no, you should be outlawed and you're not a moral person. And so like the foundation upon which that rests, that they got to that from Christianity, has gone. And that's a problem, right? So now like liberalism, like this most core tenet of liberalism is just in free fall, and you're just assuming it because of a consequence. But the thing is, the next time someone who has the courage to assert values comes along and says, fuck your individual rights, we are the value setters now, we are the ones who get to decide, and now Black Lives Matter, right? That's how they've ended up winning, because they've had the moral fortitude to be able to assert their own values in the face of an absence of value, tethered to something that is a value-setting mechanism like Christianity. That's how we've lost this.
Well, that situation would be violating 2 and 5 of my list of things, but
yeah, but they don't care. They're not liberals.
So listen, what you made a claim here. So what makes something right or wrong in your worldview? Obviously, my worldview is a materialist worldview, so it would link to prosperity in some way, shape, or form. What are you using? How do you justify individual rights being right?
Well, that's the point, isn't it, Adam? As in, I'm not a Christian either. Right, so I don't have that many options. I mean, personally, I'm willing to fall back on the fact that I'm an Englishman, and this is the English tradition. Right, that for me is enough of an anchor for me to hold on to it. But the thing is, can you hold on to that? Is it something you're willing to tie yourself down to? I'm not sure it is.
Well, so I'm happy to add justification. Yeah, sure, tradition. Yeah, but it's a tradition. I'm happy to add that.
Sure, but the thing is, it doesn't matter, because the value-setting people who are opposed to liberalism don't care. They're not gonna be persuaded by this, right? And so what we need to do is argue for an affirmative truth,
right?
And what
would the affirmative truth look like, though? Because I'm pointing to a scientific truth, and you're saying no, there's another truth that's more important. What is that truth?
Well, whatever truth we think it is, but the point is, it has to be a value-setting truth. It has to determine what a value is and what we value. And this was easy when it was God, right? But we don't have that luxury anymore. This is what Nietzsche was going on about when he's like, "Oh no, God's dead, everything's fucked." And he's like, he's right. Like, he essentially presaged the critical race theorists by like 150 years. He was really on the money with all of this, and so we are trapped in a position where it's like, we like liberalism and our moral inclinations are for liberalism, but we can't rationally argue for liberalism as being a bearer of truth, because fundamentally we know it's not.
I am arguing rationally, though.
Well,
how am I not?
Well, because you're not tethering this to an origin point.
Right. Let me bridge the divide here, because I think I understand both your positions. Adam's position is that the origin point of liberalism doesn't matter anymore, because now we can look at the outcomes of liberal societies and say these are good outcomes, and we can point to this as why we should be liberals or have liberal society. And Carl's point is a lot of people don't care about that, and that someone can create a study or create an idea in which they point to any sort of positive outcome depending on their perception to justify basically anything. So you need some sort of a priori belief that everything stems from, right? Before an outcome.
And the problem is that they can appeal to things that liberalism claims that are not true and show they're not true. For example, they can say, well, we think that there'll be better outcomes if we just privilege black people over white people. And it's like, well, yeah, you'll get better outcomes for black people. And then the liberals say, yeah, but aren't we all human?
That
Aren't we all
would
the same?
violate liberalism, though. Number 3,
Yeah,
equal protection under the law.
Violating liberalism is just not a problem for them, right? So what the question is, you would appeal, say, well, aren't we all humans? Aren't we all the same? And they would say no.
There's two.
And so
sorry, I keep interrupting.
but the thing is, they would say no, and they would be right.
Well, there's 2 different arguments that we're having here. There is the argument that this moral system, these set of rules, create the best possible society, and you're saying that that's impossible because this moral system has a flaw in that other people can exploit it. So that's like completely 2 different arguments.
You can't say it's the best possible society because they're always arguing that a better society is possible.
But they can argue all they want. Show us the goods. Yeah, obviously.
They're winning. They're constantly winning. They've been winning for hundreds of years on the argument of something that doesn't even exist.
Who is
winning? So you
winning?
need to make a better... The progressives.
I don't think they've been winning for hundreds of years.
I don't think the progressives... And I don't think the progressives are winning. I mean, I just read a book on prohibition and they lost their fucking shirts.
Sure, but Black Lives Matter is the organization that's getting billions of dollars of funding. It's not like, your view of liberalism that's getting that money. It's not like conservatism that's getting that money. These are the waves of the future. The newest generation that's being indoctrinated into schools now don't believe what you believe.
Do you have a problem with any of these 6 belief or 6 fundamentally really essential ideas of liberalism? Do you have any problem with any of them?
They're not essential ideas of liberalism. What you're appealing to here is consequences of liberalism. Right?
Well, I don't think if you take any of these away, though, that you can call yourself a liberal society.
Again, it's just appealing to a consequence. Like, let's go to the article, because these were the things that the consequences you're appealing to have been tethered traditionally.
Okay, I have the article here. See, and I fundamentally disagree that people are being taught to respect individual rights through this philosophical lens that you're putting forward here. Every single human being, every single American needs to be taught, freedom of speech, needs to be taught individual rights, needs to be taught equal protection under the law. I don't think they're being taught this through the means that you're putting forward here, saying that these means this system of teaching it is flawed. Like, I think they've moved on to a different system of teaching it. Like, people teach the Constitution. They're like, this stuff is in the Constitution, and the Constitution has a sacred aspect to it that we all as Americans respect, and that's enough for them to consider individual rights sacred.
Yeah, but all of these assumptions have collapsed.
That the Constitution is sacred.
This is why the Democrats aren't liberals in the old format.
Mm-hmm. We're still having an argument over how to justify these things.
Well, no, the argument on how to justify them has been lost.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the Democrats are now asserting positive rights.
Okay.
So, like, this is gone. Like, they sit there and say healthcare's a right, housing's a right, broadband's a right. It's like, okay, rights are constructed by the state now. So you've gone far off the reservation for constitutional liberalism, and now you're in the realms of essentially fascism.
Well,
sort of
I would say
fascism.
I would say number one, the bedrock, individual rights. I would say all of these arguments fall under individual rights, because the argument the liberals are making is that you can't maximize your individual rights if you're worried about dying because you don't have health care.
No, but this is, again, the problem, right? So the fact that the Democrats and many of the Republicans as well have essentially wandered into this territory of positive rights destroys a bunch of the liberal assumptions that have been made for when the Constitution was written, right? So now these people don't believe that rights are universal, right? Because before there was a limited number of rights, and the number of rights was exactly equal to the number of human beings. But that no longer obtains.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true anymore, right? And so now rights are whatever the state tells you rights are. whatever the state is willing to enforce and provide. It's like, okay, well, we're in a totally illiberal and new world now from the sort of classical English liberalism that the United States was founded on. And it's because, frankly, we're not all the same. And if we're not all the same, then there aren't actually universal rights. And so, again, it's these core assumptions of liberalism that just turned out not to be true. And the critical race theorists come along and go, no, black people are different to white people. So, okay, that's true. That is true. You know, there are, like, you know, cultural, like, you know, like philosophical differences in worldview between these two groups, even in the same country. And so it's like, right, okay, the things that one group believes are not held by the other group. And so you can't say everyone's the same, because they're literally, these are two differences. And so this is yet another false assumption of liberalism that has just turned out not to be true. And the thing is,
how is that a false assumption?
Because it's not a true assumption. It's not true.
So what is the specific assumption you're zeroing in on here? You're making an argument that different people,
human that doesn't exist in any time or place. That's not true. This
is one of the areas where it's conflicting, because I think tolerance of conflicting beliefs is an essential component of liberalism, and deals with the situation that you're talking about, where you have different people believing different things. And I don't see how you form a productive society where those people can peacefully cohabitate unless you have that belief, that tolerance for conflicting beliefs is acceptable.
Well, tolerance for conflicting beliefs is a really rare thing historically.
This is why liberalism is so special.
Yeah, well, no, I agree, right? But the problem is that the assumptions that underpinned that special value to liberalism that we hold no longer obtain.
So what are the assumptions that underhold that value?
The assumption is that man is created in a state of nature and then comes together to form the society. Therefore, he is an autonomous being that has come together out of his own free will to create this society. That's just not true. It's not how things worked. Well, that's not how societies came about.
What is the state of nature?
Well, that also seems seems more like equal protection under the law, not tolerance of conflicting belief systems. But I don't know how you make the causal connection between that and tolerance.
Well, okay, so the causal connection between that is that essentially that means that your participation in society is based on your consent. Mm-hmm. And so the society has to tolerate you
I got you.
in order to maintain your consent.
Okay.
But that's not true. You didn't consent to be in this society. And they know that. They knew that at the time, right? And Rousseau really struggled with this idea himself. Like, you know, everyone else struggled with it as well. And so it's one of those things where it's like, okay, that's not true. And in fact, there are many societies around the world where they just don't tolerate strange beliefs. You know,
and those are illiberal societies, though.
Yeah, but they still exist.
Yes, they exist, but they also...
liberal societies are going at the moment is not good, actually. It turns out that liberal societies kind of collapse under their own weight if they become materialistic. Too materialistic.
Right. So I mean,
we at the moment, right, the birth rate issue, there's a reason that Elon Musk is tweeting about it, because this is just such a significant problem. And because it happens over a long period of time, everyone's just like kicking the can. But really, like in 50 years' time, this is just going to be devastating.
I don't disagree that birth rates is an issue. We need people.
Yeah.
I would blame a lot of it on progressive ideology, the black pill ideology that the world is going to end. And what's the point in having kids if the world is going to... climate change is going to kill everyone in 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, but that really is a cope. What it is I'm a selfish millennial, and I don't want to give up my easy lifestyle of constant consumption in order to do my duty to the civilization I'm being a parasite on.
I'm sure that's what that is. I'm sure the climate change is more of a rationalization for your idea of what's really going on. So I don't disagree with you there. It sounds like we don't have much agreement on what liberalism is. We just disagree on how we're justifying this liberal framework.
Yes, and the problem is that the traditional justifications that we used no longer work. They're not persuasive because they're not true.
Well, I agree with you there. I don't necessarily think the truth value is important, but I think there is weaknesses.
But the thing is, the truth value is supremely important, right? It's what persuades people. People think they follow the truth. And so if something can't be shown to be true or can be shown to be actively not true, then people won't follow it.
I wholeheartedly disagree with you there. So,
well, there's two elements here. One is the elements about the foundations of liberalism, and the second is, do those matter? And I think me and Adam are basically in the camp, and I don't know if it's even worth arguing about that. I don't think it matters in terms of, I don't see people crafting arguments promoting liberalism or promoting neo-Marxism on the basis of these foundations of liberalism. So I don't know if it's like worth of us arguing again, because that was our first argument, was basically whether it matters or not. So I don't know if it's worth to get into that for another hour.
Yeah, okay, there is though, right? The reason that all we hear about from the left is the word equality. Equality.
Well, they've changed to equity. So
yeah, but they mean equality when they're saying it. This is the weakness that liberalism is. No, when they say equity, what they want is equality of outcome, right? They're saying they want everyone. Yeah, but that
was never part of liberalism in the first place.
No, but the concept of equality was. The problem is the concept of equality can be developed into what the critical race theorists
right,
argue.
But that's true of anything.
No, not at all. If you're not an equalitarian, then you can't develop the concept of equality into anything. Because
no, but what I mean is, right? anyone can take anything and kind of twist it, especially over long periods of time, to be interpreted in whatever value they want.
No, reasonably, there are limits to this. Like you can't sit there and argue that, to the NRX guys that equality is a value, because
sure, yeah, but you understand what I'm saying. You could take a lot of concepts and work them out, in ways that was never intended.
Sure, but also the way that philosophy develops is it essentially evolves over time because of the understanding that people have of the thing that's going on, right? And so, if you look at the early liberal thinkers and their books, they're really fucking thin, right? Because these guys didn't think they needed to spend very much time working out the kinks. Whereas if you look at the communists, their books are really fucking thick because they're like, well, hang on a second. There's a lot to these premises that we think the liberals have underdeveloped and need to work harder on. And I think that's actually true. The problem with liberals is they thought they could stop at a arbitrary point, and the communists are like, well, no, why wouldn't we follow this through to its logical conclusion and actually reach? And essentially what they're trying to say is it's true liberalism, right? And so the point is, liberalism contains these flaws, and it hasn't essentially updated itself as a philosophy for hundreds of years, and we need to really go back and reassess this. It's like, okay, well, what were the conditions that liberalism came about under, right? Do we still need this? Do we still actually need liberation from an overbearing king? It's like, not really. The problem we have now is not freedom. The problem we have now is actually we're all on our own, and we've got no one who loves us and who cares for us, and we're just lost and alone and stuck, and we don't know where we're going, and all we can think about is material pleasure, and it's like, okay, this is bad. Maybe a bit of idealism is what is necessary now.
Well, before we get into that, I guess when I was looking over and I'm thinking about your arguments and reading, and I've read your post on this several times, I feel like you could make the exact same argument against Christianity, and that Christianity is just going to lead to the neo-Marxist revolution too, because it has a lot of these same foundational assumptions built. I mean, liberalism is based off of a lot of Christian assumptions in the first place.
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah, I mean, yes.
Don't tell progressives that, they lose their minds.
I know it's mental.
Well, don't tell the right that, because they'll lose their minds.
I had this argument with a bunch of NRX guys a while ago. They're like, "Oh, we need to return to Christian theocracy." Or whatever. It's like, but what will prevent the next liberal revolution coming out of your Christian theocracy? Right. And then what will prevent the next progressive revolution or communist revolution coming out of liberalism? And the answer is, well, not much. Right. And so what I think we would actually have to do is essentially reassess the entire project. Right. It's not that we didn't learn any important things. We did. It's not that we don't it's not that we despise what came before, because we don't,
Right.
but we have to be realistic that we're in a new world now. This is the world that liberalism has made, flaws and all. And so from where we are now, what is it that humans need to flourish? And one thing that I think humans need to flourish is actually community. It's actually not freedom. It's actually obligation to one another, and duties and things like that Jordan Peterson has been talking about. This is the reason that he resonates with people so much. And okay, well, let's talk about that.
Well, everything that
Sure.
you're... go ahead, Seth.
I was just saying, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I feel like that has less to do with liberalism and more to do with people losing faith in, especially in America. I don't know about the rest of the world, but in America, people losing faith in the values of the older generation because of the war in Vietnam and because of civil rights, and less to do with, people becoming obsessed with foundations of liberal ideas. It feels... I guess it feels like, to me, it's not about
becoming obsessed with the foundation of liberal ideas. What it is just the natural manifestation, because the foundations are what sets the value.
I don't think it is, though, at all. I think it's just people saying, fuck are the old people. They screwed us over. Fuck the old people. Fuck conventional wisdom. We're just gonna do the opposite of whatever they said. I think that's really the driving force here. And has been since the 60s.
I'm not saying that's not a motivation, but the point is that there are other the way that these things work is you work within the existing logic of the system, right?
Right.
And the existing logic of the system values equality, for example.
Sure.
And so, okay, well then if they want to fuck you over, then they'll choose something that's ultra equality. They'll say your promise of equality is not fulfilled here, which is precisely what the communists say. Right.
Yeah.
And so, okay, well then what was the promise of equality was wrong, right? We aren't equal.
Right.
We're not equal.
Listen, I understand exactly what you're saying.
But this is what has to be explicitly denied and disavowed, to explain to them, look, you're not going to become equal. Like, because especially if we're just materialists, it's like if we can no longer say you are equal in the eyes of God, shut up, And so this argument went nowhere. Well, then that would be fine. It's like you're already equal in the eyes of God. Be quiet. That the argument would be over. But we'd have to be a Christian fundamentalist country for that, right? But we're not going to be that. So, okay, it's either we agree to communism or we have to repudiate equality, material equality, as a value. And well, that means we're going to have to repudiate equality as a value.
I don't see the world as in that clear of a binary the way that you see it. But it seems to me that, I agree with you that whatever the paradigm is that we all live in, the people that come in and want to subvert that paradigm to something different, at least at first, are going to try to couch it in the language that's acceptable to that society, obviously, because if they don't, then they're immediately going to be ostracized, and no one's going to listen to them.
So it's the easiest way to get any kind of advancement.
But it's kind of like you're kind of laying out like, that liberalism, or just basically any system that a society follows, has like this slippery slope effect that's going to slip us all the way down to communism or whatever bad thing we want to avoid, or fascism, and that you want to construct some post-liberal society where the floor is made of tar, where everyone's kind of stuck in this place, stuck in this ideology. And I'm skeptical that could ever be constructed.
Well, I'm not saying anyone needs to be stuck anywhere, obviously. But the thing is, every time you say equality and you renege on that actual extreme position, they'll just call you a liar and a hypocrite. And there will be a large number of people who will be persuaded by that. And honestly, I think, again, this is why we've found ourselves where we are. So essentially, we have to repudiate that as value, because really, I don't think we do believe in equality, right?
Well, I think we agree on equality of opportunity.
Equal protection under the law.
Let's talk about equality of opportunity then.
Okay.
So you believe everyone needs to start in the same position?
Have the opportunity. No, well, it's not exactly the same things. Have the opportunity to achieve the same thing. No, everyone doesn't start in the same position.
Equal protection under the law is not that, though.
No, but that's
equality
of opportunity.
Equal protection under the law
That's not equality of opportunity, Adam.
Yeah, but I don't think that you're arguing for something that falls outside the purview of liberalism. Liberalism is very specific about equal protection under the law, equal in the eyes of the law.
Well, I mean,
the
that's
rich
true.
man and the
Right.
poor man both get the same legal framework. We have a respect for the law, even though
And do you
we
feel that that's true?
accept, even though that we accept that there are high status people and low status people.
But do you feel that that's true?
Yes, yeah, I feel
What, you think
you should.
think that a rich person gets the same judicial process as a poor person?
It's aspirational. So I mean, it is
right, but
obviously
it's not true.
Not
So
in
it's
the
another false assumption.
Not in the most literal sense. No,
Do you-
obviously.
I
So
mean, I
it's
feel like-
very easy for someone who hates liberalism to say that's bollocks and prove you wrong, and you'll admit that's not true, right? So there we go. Like this is
but
again,
where do we go from there though? Like
Yeah, but
I
isn't that-
immediately say it's aspirational. We're working towards it in a perfect world. We'd love to have that. I mean, the whole
Yeah,
there
but
was
you're
a
never gonna get
time.
it.
There was a time in American law where if you couldn't afford an attorney, you didn't get one. Now we
Yep.
at least have the public defender, which sucks, but it's a step in the right direction, right?
it's a step towards positive rights, which totally undermines the core claims of liberalism. So no, I don't think it is.
It did no, because that we're having an argument over individual rights, and positive rights and negative rights both fall under the purview of individual rights. Okay, we can have that
No,
argument inside
they
the
don't,
frame
though.
of liberalism, because
They-
we
hang
have
on,
freedom
hang
of
on, hang on,
speech,
hang on. No,
and because we have
no.
tolerance for different belief
Adam,
systems.
You're wrong. They do not fall under the same purview, right? Positive rights are not universal. The American government is not obligated to provide lawyers to people in Zimbabwe, right? Positive rights are only specifically for that country. However,
Right.
if you're saying, well, human rights are universal, then you know that that's false. That's a direct contradiction to that statement.
It's
Right, 'cause
it's
under the
aspirational.
liberal-
It's not a state
Under,
of
no,
nature.
it's a statement of belief, right? So
Right.
a classically liberal view on rights is that there are a same number of rights as there are people, right? That's what makes it universal. But you've just admitted that the positive rights are parochial, right? Because they're positive, because they have to be affirmed and created by the state. But then this brings us into something that just isn't liberalism. Like
Yeah,
this
but-
is something else now.
Well, first of all, I really hate the whole positive negative rights hang up that people get hung up on, because it's very arguing over definitions in a way that I think
No,
is
it's not
useless.
arguing over definitions,
Well,
though. This is very real.
No, but
and
it
very
is, because
salient.
isn't the concept of negative rights in the state of nature, isn't this all supposed to come from the concept of God, that God is what grants people these negative rights?
God imbues you with these rights, yes.
Right,
the
but so if
rights-
you don't believe in God, or you
Yeah,
believe
you're
your God's
wrong.
differently, then all that stuff goes out the window.
yes, that's a problem with liberalism. That's a problem with human rights. That's
Okay, well,
exactly
but-
right.
No, but as I'm saying is, like, that's why to me this making this differential argument versus negative versus positive rights is somewhat pointless, because they're both, I mean, nothing's based on like some objective true thing that everyone agrees upon and never will be.
No, it doesn't have to be everything, something that everyone agrees upon for it to be
Mhm.
true, right? What it is that we sincerely believe it to be true.
Well, no,
Right,
you
so-
you want it so that people can't argue, they can't use some weak point of the argument to argue against something that degrades the initial concept, right?
Well, no, I'm not saying that, like it has to be an argument that no one can disagree with. There's no such thing. Right? What it is it is sufficiently persuasive to appear to be the truth to us, right? So the problem is, well, positive rights actually destroy liberalism. Like it literally says, well, if human rights are universal, then positive rights are a direct repudiation of that.
I don't
Like
see how, but
because a positive right is created by the state. So you would have to have a universal human state
yeah, but, okay, but
in
you're
order to have
wait.
a universal positive right.
You don't believe in God, so you must assume that negative rights are created by the state too.
Well, no, that's the thing, right? You don't have to necessarily like the origin of the human species
Mhm.
is not really that much of an issue. You can say, well, humans evolved to have these particular rights, because a human right is basically what you can do when you're on your own, right? When you're on an island or something, because it comes out of this concept of the state of nature. Again, it's not true. And so you are right. Like it puts us in this position where, okay, what are human rights tethered to? And the answer is nothing, or whatever the state tells you they are.
Right.
And that's not
I agree,
good
but
either
that's the
way.
problem.
But yeah, I know. But what I'm
Right.
saying is this comes from the false assumptions of liberalism.
Sure.
Right. So again, these are the problems with the false assumptions of liberalism. Is they are actually wrong, and actually we're watching the collapse of everything in real time right now.
Right. That's fine. We can have that conversation. That's fine. I don't want to lean on negative rights as being like, we have a lot of conversations where people say negative rights are good and positive rights are bad. But if your argument is that both the assumptions are false, we can't, I don't want to have that argument.
Well, I mean, why?
Because they're both
Because
false.
if they're both based on
immaterial.
false assumptions,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter.
Well, I think it does matter because our societies are currently being torn apart by the conflict between positive and negative rights.
Yeah, but this is kind of like well, we can't have gay marriage because then people will marry pets or animals. It's like,
It's also like
like you
Christianity
can have
is
some positive rights
false and
without
Islam
having
is
every
false.
positive right in the universe. Like we don't live in this extreme, binary hyperbolic world.
Sorry, what do you mean? Sorry.
Like you can have some positive rights, like, oh, you have the right to be afforded an attorney if you can't pay for one. You can have that right without a positive right. Someone saying, oh, you have the positive right to live in a mansion.
But okay, well, the problem is you can't though, right? Because as soon as you say that rights can just be constructed by the state, this is no longer a right. It's no longer what we would define as a right because a right was intrinsic to your person. That's what a right was in liberalism.
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, well, what we're saying now is, okay, well, liberalism's view of rights is just wrong. If you can have a positive right, there are no liberal rights.
Yeah, but I thought you agreed that all rights, you said rights either come from nothing or they come from the government.
That's if you are willing to concede positive rights, and you're not a Christian.
Well, where
But
do you write?
Even if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be able to argue for positive rights. Like rights are either inalienable and within your person.
Well, Christians
or they
do
are
argue for
constructed.
positive rights. Negative
Well,
rights
as well.
Negative rights are secretly positive rights that Christians argue God gave them.
Well, I mean, you can make that argument, but
Well, I mean, that was the liberal argument originally with the state of nature and all that stuff, wasn't it?
kind of.
They got a
It's-
good
it's-
justification.
Well, yeah, but again, the state of nature wasn't true. And the thing is, though, when you start stripping away these layers,
Mhm.
you realize actually none of this was really true. And so, what is true? And if you start reconstructing from what we actually believe about reality now, then you come to something that's actually quite different to liberalism.
Well, how about this? Because I feel this is such a broad conversation. I think we have to narrow this conversation down. Maybe when you have your next post, we should talk about each post individually, maybe. So if we just want to just talk about just the false assumptions of liberalism and then stop broadening it out to other things, maybe it would be easier because I feel like we're just jumping everywhere.
Yeah, I would like a more focused conversation too.
What would you prefer to focus on?
Well, okay. I want to talk about your post.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So that's why I asked, what is the state of nature?
Right. The state of nature is this theoretical pre-civilizational society where man is running around in the woods, in the wilderness, on his own, not really having much to do with his fellow man, other than occasionally meeting women to have sex with and
Nice.
to procreate with. And this is not true.
Sure.
That is
So-
definitely not true.
I'll be 100% honest. I attempted to read John Locke's Second Treatise of Government, and I just wanted to die because it was so boring.
Yes.
And it's written in that very old English style that I can't wrap my brain around. So instead, I listened to a bunch of different philosophy teachers who created courses for their students, basically just reading it to me and explaining it to me. And it seemed like what they were saying was that the state of nature wasn't Locke saying that this is the natural state that humans exist in, because wasn't he also saying that the state of war, which is people aggressing on your rights and trying to assert control over you, is also a quote unquote natural state that people exist in? When he said state of nature, he really just meant these are the God-given rights that God has given you, and that the reason people form governments and the social construct or social contract is because other people are going to aggress upon your rights that God gave you, and thus you have to form governments and communities to kind of protect yourself from other people, from the warring tribes, essentially.
Right. Well, well, again, there are no tribes at this point, right? So the state of war is Hobbes's view that everyone exists in the state of war, and Locke essentially had a foot in both camps, right?
Right.
So there's a view that the mankind in the state of nature would have been brutish and short, nasty, brutish, and short, which is Hobbes. And then you have Rousseau's view, in which mankind is essentially virtuous in the state of nature, and at worst indifferent to one another, and at best pitying his fellow man, right? And Locke occupied both camps. So he thought that you would have what do you call it? Is the something like the reasonable man or something like that? I can't remember exact term he used, but basically,
law of reason or something.
Yeah, the law of reason would be to be peaceable and cooperative, and the law of unreason would be to be Hobbesian brutes.
Right.
But it's just bollocks. Like,
I thought he was basing a lot of his state of nature stuff on like Native Americans. So he didn't really mean like people like walking around as individuals. He meant people walking around without a centralized government, the way Europeans conceptualize government.
No, they genuinely thought as individuals, and they're explicit about them being as individuals in the state of nature. And this is what the fundamental like premise of his argument is, where it's we come together to form governments, right? So we choose a government for ourselves. I mean, that's just never been true. There's never been a time where a bunch of people came together and decided to form a government. That's just not how it works, right? It's a bunch of people. Because I mean, like, think about we the people. Who the fuck is we? Where is this first person plural coming from?
America.
Yeah, exactly. You've already got a society there.
Yeah, sure.
Right. That's the point. It's not true, and none of these things are true, and that's the problem, right? It's a bunch of wishful thinking, and it's leading us down this path.
I mean, if he meant it in terms of like people living as individuals, obviously that's not true, because we evolved from So we evolved from like group-oriented species. So obviously that was always
right.
So what we came from.
Yeah. So that's the first assumption. It's just not true, right? So going on to the second one, everyone is equal. Well, that's demonstrably untrue, right? Because this comes from the idea that in the state of nature, which is pre-society, in their day, right, society was hierarchically ranked based on social class.
Equal in the eyes of God is not the same as equal, though. And I feel like there's a huge conflation
it's nothing to do with God, right?
So which God? But which one do you mean? Do you mean equal in the eyes of the law, or do you mean equal as in we all have the same amount of money and can bench press the same?
It's about social equality, right? Because inequality in the view of these people is created by social rank.
But you're not answering the question. The question is, are you saying that liberals believe everyone is equal in that they all should have the same amount of stuff and ability, or are you saying equal, the law should treat them equal even though they're all very unequal? Because one is liberalism and one is not necessarily liberalism.
Listen again, right? In the society in which John Locke lived, it was socially hierarchical. As in, you were born into a social station, right? And so equality and inequality was a consequence of the social position you occupied.
Correct. Right? The status, your social status. Okay.
Yes. And economic status was tied to this as well. Right? Okay. And so this is what they meant by inequality.
So they did. So John, you're saying John Locke meant everyone should have the same social status, and if that's related to money, they should have the same amount of money.
No. Right. What I'm saying is, as a logical consequence of it being pre-social, there is, of course, no social hierarchy. So everyone exists in this equality of having no position in the social hierarchy.
In the eyes of the law.
No.
But not in the eyes of each other.
So
in the eyes of society.
Right. So when he says everyone's born equal, again, as you said, he doesn't mean that everyone is the same. They're different. John Locke explicitly says, yes, there are people that are stronger, smarter, faster.
Yeah. Okay, so he says that.
Right. Yeah, he says that. What he means,
doesn't matter.
Right. What he means is like, and what Carl's trying to say is that like no one is born in the laws of nature. No one is born king. No one is born a peasant. No one is born noble. No one is born to some specific,
station
class
in life
or station
Yes.
dictated by, society. And
Right.
it seems like John Locke's kind of he's like combining like the Garden
It's
of
not just
Eden
it's not just Locke.
with like
They
Native
all thought
Americans
this.
and creating the state of nature idea.
It's not just Locke. They all thought this, right?
Right.
And so that's the next thing. So that
Is it related
that,
to
again,
meritocracy?
No, right? So this assumption again that we're all equal, socially equal, that's never been true as well, right? You can go back to the earliest human domiciles that have been dug up, and you can identify which one was the chieftain's domicile because he has slightly larger huts than the rest, right? There has always been social inequality because man has always been a social
chiefs.
species.
Yeah, but were chiefs born chiefs back then, or were they chosen?
Who knows?
Well, but that completely
That's
changes
pertinent.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know. So
Okay. Well, then that's what I'm saying. I don't know if this one is. You're saying I don't know if this one is false.
no one has ever been equal, right? There's never
In
been
terms of
social
in
inequality.
terms of like not being born into specific classes. I don't know if that's true.
Well, we do know it's true. No, there's never been a time of social equality.
In the way that he means it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if that's. I don't know if that's true.
Man has always been a social creature, and therefore social stratification has always been a thing.
No, but he
And
just
this is-
means no.
this
Yeah,
is true.
social stratification has always existed. Yes, but he's just
Yeah.
talking about in terms of being born into that social stratification. Doesn't mean that doesn't exist.
Well, no, that he does think that they didn't exist in the state of nature,
Mhm.
right? Social stratification doesn't exist if there is no society. It's a logical consequence of it.
I see.
And that's
Okay,
fine, right? That does make sense, right? He's not wrong that would be the case, but it's never been the case that we've been pre-society. So it's never been the case that we've lived without social stratification, right? And so social inequality is a fact of life, and that's okay. Like we've always been socially unequal. We're socially unequal now, right? And everything seems to be okay. People aren't getting, well, I mean, some people are getting murdered in the street, but you know what I mean? Like we don't have laws that say it's okay to just murder your wife or anything like that, so that's not a prerequisite for us having a good society is to say that we're all socially equal. It's not necessary.
But do you accept that equal protection under the law is necessary?
Well, we don't have it, do we?
But would you rather live in a society, if it's on a gradient scale, would you rather live in a society where we're closer to having it, or a society where it's completely non-existent? I mean, there were societies where the king could do whatever they wanted and the laws only applied to the peasants.
You said that it's necessary, right?
For liberalism, yes. I 100% think it's a necessary component of liberalism.
But it's actually necessarily true it's necessary that's not true, right?
Isn't
so
a lot of this?
Hang on.
Okay.
So you've turned this into a value, an aspirational value, which means it's not true, which is why you're aspiring to it, right?
Equal
So it's
protection
not
under the
true
law, yes.
that we have equal protection under the law, right? That's not true.
Well,
right?
it's
not.
I would say it's like
not a necessary
90%
component.
true. I would say it is 90% true.
But it's not true, right? That's the thing.
10%. I mean, there's obviously if you have a better attorney, you're more likely to get off than if you don't have a better attorney, obviously. So that's where.
That's worrying, isn't it? Because one would think it'd be whether you're guilty of committing the crime or not, right?
Well, but
that should be the factor.
You could, yes, of course, and that is the factor that we strive towards. But obviously, people are, injustice happens in the world. So there are innocent people, I'm certain, that are behind bars because they couldn't afford a proper attorney.
But Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein's clients aren't even going to face a trial, right? So we can't say that necessarily this is the case because it's not the case.
All I'm asking you for is, you're saying it's not 100% achievable, therefore we should throw it in the wastebasket, or we should still aspire towards it. So, but you're not answering the question on whether or not you think it's something that we should attempt, that we should get as close to as possible.
I'm not trying to craft a system of values. I'm trying to describe reality, right? So whether I'd like it to be the case, sure, of course I would like it to be the case, but is it the case? And that's the question. The answer is no, it's not the case. So, okay, this
Which
is
you're-
yet another one of those things.
You're
that
attacking
liberalism.
this whole article is attacking liberalism.
Right. So this
So
is
the
problem,
idea
right?
that you're just
No,
describing reality seems very
I'm not gonna let you get away
fanciful
with
to
this.
me.
I'm not attacking anything.
You
right?
are.
Because an attack implies some sort of malicious intent, right? This is a scientific investigation into the true assumptions, whether they are or not, of liberalism. These are not true assumptions, right? This is not an attack to tell you that you are mistaken on something.
Okay, so you don't want to make any sort of prescriptive claim. So when I'm asking you about equal protection under the law, you're saying that's a prescriptive claim, and I don't want to make that claim.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm not making any value judgment.
This is where I do believe liberalism is like a moral system to some extent, because if you're going to have a system where you're saying these are important aspects to social life and we need to preserve them and promote them, then you are promoting a moral system. This is why I do think liberalism is the best moral system we have going right now.
I mean, I don't even know if I would characterize.
Well,
liberalism as a
I'm
moral
happy to
system.
say, I'm happy to say, listen, equal protection under the law is based, and that we should promote equal protection under the law, and that you should,
of course,
laws that apply to the super wealthy should apply to the poor as well. Like everyone should be
is this not
operating
just
under
an
the same
exercise in
laws.
vanity? This is not just that you fluffing your feathers and saying I'm a virtuous person.
Well, these are my virtues, and my virtues are awesome. So it's a little bit of both. Obviously.
So it is just vanity, though. It's not changing the world. It's not improving anything. It's you virtue signal.
Listen
right?
to you. Listen to you.
Well, no, you're not. Addressing the real problem.
Look, if I get in my badass Ferrari and cruise down the street and say, "Look at me, I'm the fucking man. I have a Ferrari. You don't have shit." Is that me virtue signaling too?
I don't know.
It's just because my morals are a fucking Ferrari. Yes, I'm going to show them off. Okay.
Okay, but what difference does it make?
Listen, there are places in the world
it doesn't
where
make
laws
the law
are different for everybody. Laws are meted out according to your status and your social status. Yeah. I don't want to live in those societies. Not only that, those societies are lame, because you could have somebody that could be like an innovator, could be a great contributor to society, but they live in some Indian caste system and they were born in the wrong caste, and now they can't be useful. They could have been born.
But the thing is, you can't really persuade someone that, well, man used to live in a state of nature. We came together to these societies to create the society we wanted, and so let's change it because it's not the one we wanted, because they'll say that's not true. And you'll be like, yeah, okay, it's not true. And so they'll be like, so there.
First of all, I fundamentally disagree on the fact that the truth, and you're talking about objective reality truth. You're talking about scientific truth.
About what we believe to be the real truth of the thing.
Objective truth, like scientific truth? What do you mean by truth?
Whatever we believe to be true.
Well, there's two different types.
An accurate description of the world.
Okay, that scientific truth, materialist truth. Empirical
I don't know.
Empirical truth.
No. Hang on. No, look, right. So, what we consider to be true is from our perspective, right? So I don't.
No. Hold on.
No, that is
what
truth
what
is.
Epistemology are you using? Because that's how you come to what you believe.
Data that I, as a human, receive.
So you're using empiricism as your epistemology.
Sure.
Okay.
But that's not
Number 6. Knowledge is based on evidence. Purpose is to create an overarching system that mediates between multiple belief systems. Yeah. No, I have that in my liberalism.
No. I don't want to mediate between alternate belief systems. I want to establish what is true based on my values.
You are already doing it, though, because you are saying, and this is a value that you've claimed here. You've said, listen, in my value system, I only value things that are empirically true. And that this is the problem with liberalism. Liberalism has values in it that are empirically, scientifically, materialistly, objectively true. So therefore,
I don't even think that's correct, to be honest.
Okay, so what are you saying?
But the point is, hang on. Look, I'm saying it's true from the point of view of a human, right? Not true from the point of view of the universe, right? Because I don't need to know whether like quantum mechanics is
but
true.
Christianity is true from standpoint theory is true from the point of a human being.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah, that's CRT. This is why I don't buy into CRT.
Yeah, well, the thing is, CRT has got the one over on liberalism. Like, it's defeated it.
Yeah, but
like, liberalism is already dead, man.
That's a
do you not see it? What do you think affirmative action is? You've got this encoded in law.
Affirmative action.
Where you've literally got special privileges for races. And you're going, well, I mean, I don't agree. Yeah, okay, well, they're winning.
So they've
already won.
Listen, hold on a second. I'm very confused here. Because 1 minute you're arguing for equal protection under the law, and the next minute you're saying equal protection under the law. So you're not arguing for equal protection under the law.
I'm not arguing
then
for
how
anything.
can you argue against affirmative action?
I'm not saying that I am.
So are you in favor of affirmative action now? You just said affirmative action is the death of society.
Personally, I'm not in favor of it.
So
if you're saying
against it, okay. Well, if I am arguing against affirmative action on liberal principles, especially number 3, equal protection under the law. But
why should we have equal protection under the law?
Because it fosters the most fair, prosperous, low conflict society.
But it doesn't
Carl
exist.
wants an a priori.
And this is what Black Lives Matter. They'll argue, well, black people don't have equality under the law. False promise. You're a liar. You're a hypocrite. What you're trying to do is protect your position of power as a white person that does have quote unquote equality under the law at the expense of black people. So why shouldn't I privilege black people as a special interest group? That's what they'll say.
Are you advocating for a moral system that
I'm not advocating for anything.
What are you doing then? Why'd you even write the
criticizing
article?
Your moral system.
So
like, there's no affirmative proposition in there.
What you've literally drifted into
there's one affirmative
queer
proposition,
theory here. Like
truth is the affirmative proposition.
Well, that's a presupposition that people will. I mean, do I even talk about truth?
You're saying
literally
false assumptions. I mean,
these are okay. So but again, I'm not. Even
Sargon,
saying,
you've literally wandered into
deconstruction.
Look, you've come in here and wandered into deconstructionism. All you want to do is deconstruct. So as a deconstructionist, I want to ask you, are you saying that we need to come up with a moral system that has no one can argue against in any way, shape, or form? Is that the goal here?
No.
Okay, so what are we doing here?
There's anything that someone can't argue against.
Okay, so you admit. You can always argue against it. This could be the gold standard of moral systems, and someone will argue against it. But yet you keep saying because Black Lives Matter argues against this, we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I don't think that you can argue something really is like the gold standard of moral systems if you have to accept that it's fundamentally based on bollocks.
Well,
I don't think that. I
disagree.
I do think that truth is probably important.
Let's just
but I'm not,
agree to disagree.
You're prepared to live in a world of lies.
I live in a world of lies. We're surrounded. Right. Every single person around me is fucking lying to themselves, to other people.
I don't know if that's true. I think that people think they're following a truth. They believe
they're following their truth.
To be true.
Yes.
Yeah, but they are following what they sincerely believe to be true, except for you, who's like, yeah, no, I'm following bollocks.
No. Wait, Adam believes that's not true. Adam does believe that liberalism produces the best society.
I do, yes.
Yes, but
he just doesn't have an a priori belief for it.
I'm using empiricism. Empiricism is my epistemology, and I am evaluating every single one of my essential components of liberalism through the frame of empiricism.
Yeah, but as soon as we start questioning the assumptions this is based on, it turns out that this is
I don't
rootless.
care about the
right, so you don't care about the truth.
Listen, the Christians will come to me and say that we need to value forgiveness because there's this guy Jesus that lived 2,000 years ago, and his God Father basically said, I hate all of you on earth, and in order for me to forgive you, I have to kill my only son and sacrifice him for you because you're all pieces of shit. Okay?
Yeah.
That's how they come to their conclusion. I don't give a fuck
yeah.
if that's how they come to their conclusion. I don't personally believe it, but I know that in society, it's helpful if a lot of people believe forgiving people for being pieces of shit makes a better society. I believe it
what you're
because
saying
of,
there,
of
right,
scientific study.
Yeah, but science is just the handmaiden of the existing order, right? It can't set
Oh my
values.
God, Sargon.
Well, no.
Please
Science,
stop
no,
going
Adam,
full
science can't
postmodernist
set
on us.
values. But do you accept that? Science can't set values.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
Definitionally. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
But
So
there is
you
there
take
is
back what you just
science
said
is an
there.
ethic though.
No, don't try and dodge.
No, but
that.
he's saying
Science
he's using
can't
science to
set
find
values.
Wait,
right?
Adam is saying he's using science to find values that produce societies he wants to live in.
You can't.
That you can do. Yes.
Yes,
that
you can.
All you can do is go on the previous assumptions of the existing paradigm. Science can't set values.
Well, technically, that's true for all of human thought.
I'm not
so I don't know how
using
you
it
get
for-
escape
I'm
from
not-
that, but
That's not true. Non-scientific thought can set values.
This is
right.
no. About saying basing everything off of pre-assumed your previous assumptions of reality.
That's
all of
and
human
that's not
change.
even
I
the
don't
way
know
that
how
I'm
you
doing
escape
it.
that.
You can challenge these. You
Look,
can
I'm
adopt
using-
different assumptions.
I am
right?
using tradition and looking at things that work, and then I am evaluating those things that work, like forgiveness. Okay,
Yes.
I heard the Jesus
Right.
story. I was skeptical, and I looked for another validation of it in another place, and guess what? I found it. I found it through the scientific method.
Yeah, but you're not setting any values. You're just
No.
presupposing values you grew up with. That's literally what tradition is.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So don't say no.
But there
okay?
wasn't.
It's
There
not-
were
and I'm not
people.
saying
There
that's
were
wrong. I'm not
people.
saying that's wrong.
There
right? I'm
were
not saying that's
people
wrong.
that grew up with the tradition of slavery.
Yes.
Okay, were those people right?
I don't think so. No.
I don't either. Guess what? The science agrees with us. They were wrong as fuck.
It doesn't matter what the science agrees with
Okay, well
because we're interested.
matters-
In what
it matters to
values
me
we're going
because-
to pursue.
it matters to me because it's my epistemology. It's how I justify the world. It's how a lot of people justify the world. So
It doesn't matter though, right?
Mm-hmm.
What matters is what we are going to value, and what we value is based on what we think is true, right? And so the questions of liberalism itself. Do we think these things are true? And it turns out they're not true. And so now we're
listen.
sat there saying, well, we value a bunch of things that are not true.
we're having
It's
an
like, okay,
argument.
but I don't think we want to be liars.
Well, no.
Conscious liars.
No,
I am not
valuing-
lying. Why are you calling me a liar, Carl? That's
But
so. That's
you
so
are-
bad faith. It really is.
No, Adam, don't even fucking start, man.
How
This is
am I-
exactly what you did today.
How
right?
am I
Look,
calling
you
you?
are-
Look,
You are failing to grapple with the real problem of liberalism is that it's tethered to fucking nothing. And the only thing you would tether it to would be a lie
But
by your own admission.
Listen,
Wait.
Uh,
Okay.
Yeah.
This is not. No one's lying here. This is the disagreement. The disagreement is, as I said a million times, but everyone's ignoring this fucking conversation. Adam's point is that he doesn't believe having an a priori idea about liberalism is necessary because we've been living it so long that he can use science and empiricism to point to outcomes and say this is the society we want to live in. So he's
Right.
not lying about that. He's saying he just doesn't think that it matters, that liberalism is not based on, Adam's creation and by God and all this stuff, the state of
Yeah, but
nature stuff.
it's
that
not
doesn't
really
exist.
based on that anyway.
I could say the same thing
Right.
about Christians too. I could say, listen,
Sure.
the Christians are basing their belief that forgiveness is good on a fucking lie. Okay,
and so- but
but
wait a
you
minute,
know, I
I-
wouldn't
Yeah,
do
no,
that. I would not do
you
that
do,
because
but-
I don't want to be an a-hole. Okay,
Yeah, but the thing is, this is why the new atheists had such success, right? Because
they are
fundamentally-
successful. It seems
Yeah,
like they're
very.
fucking dead to me.
Yeah, they're dead now, but the damage has been done.
Okay,
right?
well, they're dead.
Like the damage is long, and it's been done.
I think
there's no
fucking-
undoing it either, right? No one treats the Bible like the literal word of God anymore, right? And the people who do are looked at as being backwards.
Listen,
right? And they're
Sargon.
a very small percentage of Western population.
Sargon, say it with me. Let's call the Christians liars together. It'll feel good. Come on.
In a way, it kind of is a lie.
So you're
of course,
you're
because
telling
the Bible-
telling
okay,
your
the
audience
Bible
they're a
is-
bunch of like simps lying to themselves. Is that what you're saying?
I don't think my audience is overwhelmingly Christian.
Well, I think they are.
Well, I mean,
I think
the
we have a lot of
entire-
Christians in our audience.
Yeah, and you probably do. And there's going to be a lot of those Christians who say, well, I look at the Bible like a metaphorical truth, right?
Right.
I don't. I think more of them look at it like it really happened, like Jesus died on the cross for forgiveness.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know if most
But it
Christians
doesn't matter,
believe
right?
in like Adam and Eve, like literally, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I don't know what the
but
stats
the point
are.
is, we're not going back, right? We're not going to be going back to believing these things.
This is the beauty of liberalism. You guys can have your belief, okay? God bless you for it, okay? I can have my belief, and God bless me for it.
Well,
let's just carry on, right? So there was never a time in which mankind was socially equal. Do we agree?
Yes.
Well, he was using this as a justification for getting rid of the divine right of kings and relating it to like Adam.
more rigid social hierarchies as well. Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. And so the assumption being, if we actually form societies for ourselves, then it is not justified to have these kind of strict hierarchies. Right. Not true.
By birth, by nature of birth.
Yeah. By virtue of birth. Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but whatever. We can.
It's just not true. We never existed in the state of nature, a pre-social society.
Well, I mean, I don't think we ever exist in the Garden of Eden. I agree with that. But I don't know if we've ever. I think a lot of society. I wouldn't be surprised if there are societies that existed without birth hierarchies, especially like hunter-gatherer societies.
No, like any kind of social hierarchy is something you're born into, right? Any society has a sort of social hierarchy, and your position in the society is because.
Yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. Right? Well, because I mean, I thought my understanding of the state of nature was basically, Locke was saying that state of nature is kind of like this idealized Garden of Eden existence, and then that humans' sin and humans' problem is basically put us in a fallen state, religious. And that's why we need judges on earth to judge our behavior, and that's why we construct, societies and social contract.
Yeah, but John Locke was arguing against this view, right? He didn't believe in that view either.
I thought he did believe that men have fallen, and that's why we need society.
No, he was arguing specifically against Sir Robert Filmer's Patriarcha, right, which was that view. Okay. And Locke was arguing, no, that's not what it was. What it was is we existed in a state of nature and decided to come together to form a society. But that was also not true.
Yeah, but why did we come together to form societies? What was the point of that?
We did.
No. Under John Locke's view, why did we come together to form societies?
Well, to sacrifice part of our rights in order to gain various protections for property and safety and stuff like this.
Sure. But that means that people existing in the state of nature were still doing all the bad, fucked up shit. That it wasn't some idealized. That means that under Locke's view, people before governments in his state of nature were still committing bad things, still doing crimes, doing all these things.
He doesn't deny that.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, it sounds like the way you're kind of talking about it, like that he means the state of nature was everyone was living together and hugging each other in nature, which that's not really what he meant.
No, he accepts that there are difficulties and problems in the state of nature. He just thought that was true. He just thought there was a pre-social man, and that's not true.
Okay, all this to me, my understanding is all of what he was saying is just foundationally based on Christianity, essentially. That's where he's drawing all this from.
He was arguing against Christian theocracy.
Yeah, he was arguing against Christian theocracy, but
from a naturalistic perspective.
Right, but he's still basing everything on the Christian idea of God and God imbuing people with rights. And
really, I
mean,
this stuff. In a very indirect way, maybe, as in, at some point God created man. But
I thought that was the whole basis of men's right to life, was that that you don't have a right to life personally because God gave it to you. Like, you have to protect what God gave you.
Well, I mean, he doesn't explicitly say this in the Second Treatise, as I recall. But his argument doesn't hinge on religion. His argument hinges on, they call it natural rights, right? So it's just what we are naturally imbued with. I mean, he would literally say by nature, right? And
my understanding was
he'd probably go back and say God did it,
Right, but that was my understanding. Well, that's why he was very anti-atheist, because my understanding is that when he says natural rights, he literally means these are God's rights. God's imbuing nature with these things, these qualities.
Or at least my reading of it doesn't come across as him beating the Bible, right? He's not.
Well, I agree. He's not beating the Bible, but he kind of just says, like, this is where it comes from, and then he just moves on from there. He's kind of interpreting it in a liberal framework, essentially.
Yeah, but it's not really very relevant to the thing that he's concerned about. Like, he's concerned about. Not really. He's concerned about why some people should have authority in society over others because of their station in life, right? And so his argument is, well, we came together to form this society, and so why should you not have social equality? And it turns out it's just because it's just physically not possible for humans to be socially equal.
Okay.
Jordan Peterson style. So that's the next. So that's number 2, right? Everyone is equal. No, actually, everyone's unequal. Like nobody's equal, right? So then this goes on to part 3, the universal man. That in this state of nature, like they accept that. Oh well, have you noticed that a lot of the differences between like an Amazonian tribesman and like your average Englishman are because of the societies in which they grew up? It's like yeah, that's true. So oh well, there must be a universal human then that existed. And it's like no, because all people, because again, if you remove the society, the differences between people that are created by society, by putting them in this state of nature, well then logically you would get a kind of universalized human that is the same in all times and in all places, because the differences that are created by society didn't happen because they didn't live in a society. But because nobody didn't live in a society, there was never a universal man. And so this idea that we're all basically the same, that's not true either. Like all people are created in a time and a place, and they always have been. And that means they've come out of a society that has certain presuppositions, certain institutions, a particular kind of language, certain values. And so you've never had a person who could fit in anywhere, right? It turns out that that's just not the case. And so the sort of view of universalism of liberalism, not true, right? There is no one thing that all humans really would
Well, I mean, if you
ascribe
took
to.
like a baby out of most places, I assume it could fit into most societies.
Yeah, but the baby would be raised in a society.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like the universal human in terms of a pre-socialized human.
No, but that's not what they're saying. But
Mhm.
but no, I mean, obviously, if you take a baby and raise it in a different society, the baby will have the values of that new
Right.
society, obviously. But the point is, no human is raised outside of a society, right? And so you can't just say, well, humans are all the same. They're not all the same. They're actually all different, right? This is, part of them being unequal is difference, and they're all different, and all societies are different, and that's good. That's the plurality. So that's another just false assumption, right? And so the blank slate, I'm sure I don't need to convince you guys of that.
That one is tough for me because I don't see how that relates to liberalism, because it doesn't really touch on any of my core components of liberalism, the blank slate thing.
But to be fair, like I'm not going by your core components. I'm going by what John Locke wrote.
Right.
John Locke was a deep blank slater.
So
And
your
again, this
argument
comes-
is so your argument is, just to get it clear here, is because he is one of the foundational thinkers of liberalism, because he thought it's essential to liberalism, because I don't necessarily see how that works.
No, it's because liberalism, again, is the idea of universality is that we're all essentially blank slates that have our social programming imprinted on us by the society. And so pre the society, of course, that means we've got no social programming. Again, it's not true.
But there is a gradient scale, because obviously we have this thing called cultural evolution. So there is quite a bit of imprinting and malleability to human beings. I would argue that it's not infinite, and blank slaters think it's stronger than it actually is. But to say that it's non-existent, then you're just biologically determinist, which I don't think that end explains everything either.
Well, I agree. I'm not saying that it does. But I'm saying that another core liberal assumption is that everyone is a blank slate, and that's just not true. Right. And so, the reason this is important to repudiate, specifically in the modern times, is because of differences in gender. Right. It's very clear that boys and girls are not blank slates. Like they have core built-in differences between them from the very earliest of ages. And I say this as someone with children, right? You can see it. So that it's very, and this is the gender activists or BTFO'd at this point. They're not right about that. So that's just another important thing, that is the door is opened by liberalism, believing in the blank slate. It's not true, right? So that door has to be closed.
The who's the guy that wrote the blank slate? I can't remember his name.
Steven Pinker.
Steven Pinker, yeah.
Yeah.
That guy's a giant liberal.
Yeah, I know.
And he's literally wrote the book against the blank slate. So
Yeah.
I don't understand how that is a necessary component to liberalism. Like, in order to accept liberalism, you have to accept that human beings are a blank slate.
I just explained it.
Okay.
Like the idea.
Yeah.
Sitch,
So
do you
anyway.
understand it, or?
Well, it would be based off the equality thing, because it's like, okay, well, it's easy to argue equality if everyone's born a blank slate, essentially, would be the argument.
Okay.
We can't be equal if we're not all blank slates, because then you've got to essentially say that all differences are social constructs between people. They're socially created, but we know that's not true. So,
Gotcha.
I mean, with the state of nature thing, John Locke's not arguing to return to the state of nature. He's just arguing that certain principles. Well, I don't know about Rousseau, but I mean, he's just saying that certain principles that we're imbued with should be reflected in our society, right?
Rousseau, well, Locke is arguing that we sacrifice some of our natural rights for the protection of others.
Right.
And Rousseau is arguing what we actually should be doing, if we're going to be Enlightenment rationalists, is sacrifice all of our natural rights in exchange for civil rights, so we can return to this state of nature in which we never existed.
Okay. That sounds stupid, but okay.
Yeah, it's really fucking
Well, that doesn't even make sense. Why would you sacrifice your natural rights to return to your natural rights? How does that make any sense?
Exactly, because it's so we can be the savage that is living in the woods alone within society, because that's the only way we can truly be free.
Okay. I don't know. Doesn't make sense.
It's really fucking stupid.
Yeah.
But this is where and this is what the Democrats all believe. This is like we're living in Rousseau's world these days. And Locke's world is being chewed up by Rousseau.
Why do you say Democrats? Because I'm confused. I heard Democrats were all right-wing neoliberals.
No, they're for positive rights.
Oh, okay.
Like Locke is for negative rights, right? And if things stopped at Locke, then we probably wouldn't really have any issue, right? It wouldn't matter that liberalism was based on a bunch of false assumptions, because at the end of the day, these are pretty solid assumptions. And like the United States didn't deteriorate as a society until the 20th century, when the positive rights started becoming politically prominent. Right? Because when you have, even though they are false assumptions, when people sincerely believe them, then a society based on negative rights works. It's actually very effective because it creates a certain kind of person. But we're long past that now. Like, we can't rescind the welfare state.
I mean, first of all, you have to be very clear what you mean when you say like things were fine and then degraded, because things obviously weren't fine. There's lots of fucked up shit that was going around in the world and in liberal societies. What you mean is like liberalism was seeming to be okay and then started to degrade, right?
As in the society itself produced capable, hardworking, intelligent, prosperous people, right? And now, but positive rights do the opposite of that. They incentivize lazy, useless, incompetent people.
Well, wait a minute. Because, like, when I look at, before the 20th century, I mean, we had slavery, we had people were being literally enslaved. We had people who the average public was way stupider then than they are now. I don't know. 100%. That's completely true. At least in terms of like raw intelligence and knowledgeability about topics, that is 100% true.
Go back 100 years and look at the schools tests and things like that. Like, I couldn't do them.
I'll have to go back to
honestly
early 19. Yeah, but is that just because they're teaching different things? It's not a question of intelligence.
The questions are really fucking complex. And I'm sat there, I was sat there feeling like a fucking moron, just looking at these like school kids' textbooks, thinking, shit, man. Like, I don't think we're smarter than they were.
Well, I'd have to look at this. It's just weird to me that there's this idea that, like, when kids are working in factories in the turn of the century, like, everything was fine until positive rights.
But that wasn't the universal view, right? And things were like getting better.
Sure, I agree.
But the point is the quality of person.
But that's part of positive rights. Like all of workers' rights and all the things that came out of, like, the 5-day work week and having weekends and not having children work in factories. I mean, these are all based on positive rights.
Well, not really. Like again, the government doesn't have to provide you with anything to set a law that a company has to, allow you to have 2 days off, right? That's not the government isn't providing. No one's forced into physical servitude to provide that to you.
I
That's
see what
just
you're
a
saying,
rule, right? So that's fine.
It's a
that's not-
restriction on a behavior.
yeah, exactly. Right. It doesn't. No one's labor is compelled to provide you with that thing. So it's not a positive right. It's just a rule. So that's not a problem, And if that's where it stopped, then fucking hell, that would be fine, But that's not where it stops. And now, essentially, the taxpayers have to underwrite the lazy people in society. Lo and behold, we get a larger, lazier, stupider society. Who could have predicted?
Yeah, but it's just when especially people on the right, but even people on the left, when everyone points to like the post-World War II America as like the ideal time for the country, I mean, this was a heyday of positive rights. Like I don't see how positive rights are the thing that caused the downfall.
Well, because it incentivizes the wrong things, right? Like if you're incentivized to be self-sufficient because no one's going to take care of you, well, you make different decisions. You've got a motivation to get up and get out of work. You've got a motivation not to get fired from your job.
No, but so in the post-World War II economy in America, there was a fear of communism taking over, and because of that, the American government's policy was a positive rights assumption policy of sort of we need to make it almost they didn't really phrase it this way, but it was essentially we need to make sure that everyone has a job, and it almost became like a positive right that everyone has a right to have a job, and they're really trying to push everyone to get a job. They're really trying to push unemployment down as low as humanly possible. And that was really the economic policy for 30, 40 years after World War II. And that led to a lot of the good things and a lot of the good ideas that you're talking about. So I don't think put all positive rights in this bin and just say this is the problem. It's like certain positive rights are bad.
Guaranteed you a job, then there was no positive.
Well, they don't guarantee. Well, they didn't really guarantee, but they would create the economic environment that basically made it, incentivize businesses to hire people essentially.
Well, honestly, they
did have lots of job programs. So
there is, from an Austrian perspective, a big argument about that. As in, was that good? Should the government be interfering in the creative destruction of the free market? Well, in the short term, yes. But again, when you start deforming markets, you end up in a different place than you started, right?
Well, you can't. Yeah, but the whole idea that there's like a natural market, markets naturally tends towards someone at the top sucking up all the resources. So there's no you can't just have a natural market hands off because it will never become. It always becomes toppled over.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have anti-monopoly laws or anything like that.
Sure,
but we're getting a bit off the topic. But the problem is the positive rights, in my view. But anyway, so the final one is equality of opportunity, right? And this just logically entails that everyone has to start at the same position.
Are you still do we give up on the topic?
Well, I don't want to go off into the weeds about early 20th century American history.
Don't feudalism us, Carl.
It's fine. We can move on to equality of opportunity.
Well, I've only got another 15 minutes. So.
Carl, you called me a liar and I called you bad faith. Okay, so we have to square up.
Saying
okay,
you are a liar, as in you're deluded. But you are essentially saying, well, look, I'm happy to believe or at least profess a bunch of untruths.
I'm not. I am not, though. That's mischaracterizing my position. So, and Sitch has tried to point this out 50 times already. Look, I am not a Christian. I am not a Christian.
But
because I don't believe.
I'm asking you to be a liberal.
But I do believe in the liberal things.
Right.
Wholeheartedly.
But you don't believe the things those liberal things are rooted on.
That is first of all,
think they matter.
You're coming in here and saying these things are essential to liberalism. And I keep asking you, how? Show me the causal connection. You're going, 300 years ago, a guy talked about this. And I'm going, you need to do a little better than that, okay? That to me is completely irrelevant.
Why is the origin of liberalism, the philosophical origin of liberalism, irrelevant?
Because any moral system has to sustain itself over time. And how it sustains itself over time often diverges from how it once did. At one time, there was a point when people believed, God said it and therefore it's true. And that was good enough. One of the reasons why I think Jordan Peterson has become so popular is because a lot of these things people wanted to believe because God said it was true, but couldn't believe in God anymore. Jordan Peterson started giving them scientific, psychological reasons to believe those things were true that had an empirical basis that was useful to them. They could say, listen, I like believing that forgiveness of my enemies is a good idea, but I don't buy into the God justification anymore. Give me a better one. Jordan Peterson.
So they don't call themselves Christians.
Right. But so.
Right. So if you don't believe in the origin point of liberalism, don't call yourself a liberal.
But can't things move beyond that origin point though?
So what am I supposed to call myself? Culturally liberal?
Possibly. That actually sounds
that's
like
ridiculous.
Quite a
this is a ridiculous standard.
No, but it's not though. You've literally just laid it out. The people who are not Christians but like the moral consequences of Christianity don't call themselves Christians.
First of all, I wholeheartedly disagree with you on half of these being essential components to liberalism anyway.
Okay, but you're not disagreeing on the philosophy, right? You're not like arguing that John Locke didn't say this. You're not arguing that John Locke isn't one of the progenitors of liberalism.
I completely. There are a lot of different people. Yeah, there are a lot of different people that were progenitors of liberalism. Yes.
Yeah, and all of them believe in these things.
Yes, but there are, just like there are a lot of different theologians that have argued over what Christianity is, there are a lot of different philosophers that have argued over what liberalism is. It's basically the same thing.
Why don't you name me the liberal philosopher who didn't believe in the state of nature?
First of all, it's immaterial.
It's because you can't, because they all do, Adam. Right? It's not immaterial.
Yes.
Right? This is what the philosophy is. They all believed in the state of nature, and this is what they argued about for hundreds of years. And it just turned out it was bollocks, right? And so if it doesn't matter to you, then you are more postmodern than I'll ever be. Like, that's a wildly postmodern position.
I don't know how you can say that, but so in order for you to accept liberalism, you have to buy into the historical origin of liberalism.
Well,
that makes
the historical origin of liberalism just is.
That makes no sense to me. In order to enjoy a game of basketball, do you have to buy into the historical origin of the sport basketball?
Well, again, to call yourself a Christian, you have to believe in Jesus.
Right.
If you don't believe in the historical, the historical arguments that liberalism made, then you can't really call yourself a liberal, can you?
So you're saying you're equating liberalism to a religion.
It's a philosophy.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a philosophy that has certain assumptions that underpin it, that develop into a sort of guiding set of moral instructions in the world.
Right? Well, I guess I'm a cultural liberal then.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm culturally
I'm not saying
liberal.
that's wrong. That's fine. Of course, that's not wrong either, right? But the problem then is when you ask someone, okay, but I want, why are you not a sincere liberal? And you're like, well, because the underpinning assumptions aren't real.
Now you're calling me insincere, Carl. This is so bad faith. I hate to say it, but it's totally.
How is it bad faith? And you're saying you can hold a philosophy
is bad faith
without believing any of its fucking tenets, mate.
First of all,
the tenets.
Many people have argued over the origin of different philosophies or the origin of different ideas in Christianity.
Wait.
None of those people come out and say, like, it's a totally authoritarian move what you're doing here, Carl. You're basically saying you have to buy into what I am saying, otherwise you're an insincere liar.
No, Adam,
that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous standard, okay?
No, well, wait a minute. If you go to like every person who identifies as a liberal,
They're going to have a different thing. Yes.
Well, that identifies as a liberal, and you say like, here's John Locke's, state of nature. I would imagine that like 90% of people don't agree with the state of nature, argument.
Yes, that too.
So I don't think that means that suddenly they're not liberals. If
or they're liars or insincere.
Operates under liberalism doesn't believe in this.
I don't think most people know anything about.
Of course, you're right. They don't. So I'm saying if you ask them, they wouldn't agree with this stuff.
Well, exactly. And so if you say, okay, well, are you a liberal? They probably say, well, no, because that's based on untruths.
No, they would say yes. But then you say, well, what about this state of nature? They'd say, well, I don't believe in any of that stuff.
Yeah. And if you had a semi-intelligent person who understood actually to have a convincing belief system, it has to be at least vaguely consistent with something you authentically believed, they would be like, well, yeah, I'm not really a liberal.
They're agreeing with, it's like Adam's basketball example. They're agreeing with the rules producing results they like, not so they the would origin say, of why someone decided to create the rules of basketball in the first place.
In the same way that you might call yourself a cultural Christian, you'd have to call yourself a cultural liberal. Right?
No, but like, I don't know who created the rules of basketball. For all I know, it had some bizarre religious connotation about Jesus that I'm completely, not aware of. But that's all irrelevant to today's modern enjoyment of the sport and to play the rules in the game of basketball. Well, and I'm saying that to play the game of liberalism, it's somewhat irrelevant, the origin point of why the rules exist the way they do.
It's only irrelevant until someone interrogates them.
Well, sure, if you need to defend it on that space. And I don't think you really need to defend it in that way, because I don't see the neo-Marxist attacking it the way that you're sort of conceptualizing them attacking.
But in the critical race theory, the key writings that form the movement, they expressly do this.
No, they expressly say liberalism doesn't work.
Yeah, but they expressly attack these foundations. Like
they attack the foundations of individual rights, not the state of nature.
No, that's not true. Let me find it. I'll tell you.
Okay, tell me where they talk about the state of nature.
Right? Yes, there is literally. Let me find it.
Dead air. What's going on?
It's fine.
Well, I'm just searching my notes.
Can we just stop with the
if there's one thing
personal attacks here? Called, let's keep it professional.
The author is Anthony Cook. It's essay 7 called "Beyond Critical Legal Studies: The Reconstructive Theology of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr." Right, that's one. There is also another one called "Whiteness as Property," in which they attack this. And
she's attacking property. It's like the concept of property.
And there's also Charles Lawrence's.
She's attacking property rights.
Go and reread it. She still also critiques Locke's view of private rights, natural rights.
But yeah, exactly. But also, I'm not disagreeing that they attack.
But also in Essay 21, The Word in the River by Charles Lawrence, he also does this.
They're attacking. She's Cheryl Harris is attacking property rights, and she's attacking Locke's view of property rights as being inherent. But they're not. I don't remember. I have to go back and read the chapter time. I don't remember them criticizing it, saying that liberal principles are based on a false assumption of the state of nature, because that wouldn't even make sense, because they agree with those assumptions. I don't understand why they would attack them. They want those assumptions to be true. They want humans to be born a blank slate.
For example, Anthony Cook specifically says that Locke and Hobbes's natural view of man is actually an alienation from his true nature. Right? Man was never in a state of nature. So this view is an alienation from what man really is. That's literally Cook's position, is that Locke's assumption of the state of nature is wrong. This is exactly how they're attacking liberalism. And so the second that liberal assumptions get interrogated by any kind of intellectual, they collapse in on themselves almost instantly. And now where do you go? As a liberal, you can't philosophically argue for liberalism because those assumptions are now wrong.
But you can argue empirically. That's my whole argument.
No, but they're arguing from value judgments.
Can I just? I want to get you.
Well, wait. What I wanted to ask, which I keep getting sidetracked on this, because it was like what you said originally in the beginning of the conversation, which you keep coming back to, and what is the main disagreement between the two of you guys, is that how do we, Carl, create if we're going to create a philosophy or a system based on an idea, an a priori idea, how do we know that that's a good idea or a moral idea?
Yeah, great. That's my question. That's my question right there. And how do you test it?
We don't. Well, we would have to do something to test it.
Yes, I agree. What do you do?
Right. So the the best thing, I think, is for actually the most persuasive thing is for us to argue what is true, right? Because what is good will be mediated by the value judgments we make, right? The values that we hold will change, as in we think that equality is good because it was true, but it wasn't true, right? So is it good to be equal? And actually, there's an argument that no, equality is an evil thing. Equality is to force people who are incapable to be the same as people who are capable.
Let's do the forgiveness thing, because I think it's clearer. Like if you want to argue, say I want to argue that people should be forgiving, like the forgiveness idea is a good thing for society. How do I make the justification in a way that's true?
Well, it's not a true or false statement, right? What you're saying is, I think it would be good for society if we forgave, right? That's a value judgment. Right?
Exactly.
So, yeah, but you trying to look for a true or false for the value judgment is kind of nonsensical.
Well, maybe we can do it backwards here, because you are making an argument that liberalism is turning society in a wrong direction. So when you say that, when you make that declaration, what direction is, because there's a value judgment on which direction you want society to go. We are obviously making a value judgment and saying we're going in the wrong direction. What is that wrong direction?
Well, the wrong direction is the idea of the equality and atomization of people, because really what's happening when we sever the natural bonds that people have with one another, returning us to what they've conceived of being as the state of nature, that's actually putting us in an artificial place that we've never been before. And
can you be more specific, like something more tangible?
What do you mean? Like,
well, you're saying
that was totally specific.
When you say atomizing,
sure. When
people are not communicating enough or not.
Yeah, they don't have friends. They don't go out. They're convinced that they shouldn't be dependent on one another, and that no one should have obligations to one another. Right?
So people are not having meaningful relationships, and also they're not being honest or forthright, or, I mean, what do you mean by that last part?
Well, when they're not part of a community, right?
Okay.
Because this is the Rousseauian end of the social contract, is the idea that people will live by a set of rules rather than by a set of customs. And that's wrong. Like, nowhere have we ever just lived by a set of rules. We've always lived by custom.
And how are you judging that criteria? What epistemology are you using?
Right. Epistemology means how we know something.
Right. That's what I'm asking.
And so how I know something is literally my senses.
Okay. So empiricism you're using.
No, I'm not even necessarily, like, I'm just literally looking at the world, Adam. Right. It's like, it's not, there's no epistemological mystery here. Like, well, it's just the same way everyone else.
Well, no, I would look at it, like, I would break it down into, I would start, I would craft some kind of survey asking people, how many meaningful relationships do you have? Is it 10? Is it 20? And then I would start figuring out specifically, what does the world look like according to your criteria? You're making an argument that...
Yeah, but this has all been done. Like, we know that people are becoming lonely and depressed, and they're having...
Has it been done? Like, I mean, I don't know the surveys and
Yes,
stuff.
it's been done. Like, you can... Like, the number of... In Japan, for example, I saw the statistic the other day. 40% of Japanese men are now virgins. They haven't been on a date.
Right.
Like, that's the collapse of society right there. Writ large. Couldn't be any
Japanese men have not... I mean...
Yeah. 40%.
We're doing okay in California, so I'm just like,
I don't know if you are, actually. I think if you did a quick Google search, you'd find that, like, more Zoomers and millennials than ever have never had sex.
Yeah, it's weird.
And that's the collapse of society.
It's totally weird.
So I read something for a second. Now I'm lost. What does this have to do with how do we or do we need to test?
And is that one of the criterias? People having a lot of sex, Carl? Is that something that figures into us moving in the wrong
that's
direction.
certainly
No, no,
one indication of whether people are having a social life or not.
Right, but
Yeah.
that's based off of looking of a materialistic view. You're looking at results of something and making a determination. How do we craft a philosophy or some way of living that's not based off of those things?
Right. Well, that's the thing. I'm not sure we can necessarily just craft these to create a desired outcome, right? And so, what I think is actually, if we just were to realign the presuppositions that our worldview is built on, then we would make different decisions in our daily life, right?
Yeah, but how do we
And
know
so-
those presuppositions are good?
It doesn't matter whether they're good or not. What matters is
Well, then
whether
why
they're
would
true,
anyone
right?
follow? Well, okay.
Because they'd be true. Like, because nobody really wants to be a
But true
committed
things
liar.
don't. Just because something true doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
Truth
not
is
sure
neutral.
that's correct.
Eugenics is true. That doesn't mean that we should engage in eugenics programs.
Sure, but the question is, what do we think the state of humanity is in the origin of it and how we came to this point, as in what's good for us, right? Eugenics does, as you say, have a kind of truth to it, but it also ignores other things. Like, we feel that there is an intrinsic moral worth within each human being,
Right.
right? But that's not something that we need a proof of.
There are people, though. I don't feel that with everyone.
Explanation. Why not?
Well, you could.
Well, they're evil
Which human
people.
beings don't have moral worth?
Serial killers. The shooter on fucking 4th of July.
Mhm.
So
Fuck
what
that
happened
guy.
to forgiveness?
Well, forgive them in prison.
Hey, I'm
well,
not saying I believe in forgiveness either.
Well, forgive him once
and
he's
this is the problem.
dead.
So these are all complex questions that we'd have to answer.
Look, it's not my job to forgive him. It's Jesus's job. Okay, let's get him to Jesus as quick as possible.
I'm
Well, no,
glad
but-
you accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior, Adam.
But
The
regarding
divine truth of him
There
dying
you
on the
go.
cross, eh?
that's-
There are evil people. I don't think that everyone has.
Right.
Well, wait. Go back to the eugenics thing, because this is my point, is that you just can't say, well, truth can't be the claim in which everything stems from.
No, the value judgments we have will be
Mhm.
informed by the things we believe that are true, right? And having a narrow and myopic view of things is going to create a kind of narrow, myopic moral view. We don't have to take that. We've learned a lot of important things, and like I said, I don't despise liberalism. I don't think it was a bad idea.
Mhm.
I don't think it was something that has irrevocably harmed us, and I think that we've learned many lessons about what public goods can come from it. But we do have to accept that it was based on a bunch of false assumptions, and a lot of those are now manifesting in really negative ways. And so we need to change those assumptions to something that is actually true, incorporating and synthesizing into whatever comes next those things about liberalism that we value and found to be good, right?
Yeah, but how do we determine what is true if we're not, if we're going to throw out science and we're going to try to create some a priori
I mean, we
system?
can use science. Like science, it's a tool that we can use, right? So, for example, right, the science is very useful in showing us that pre-social man is bullshit, right?
Sure.
It's demonstrably, it's incontrovertible, right? The reality that we understand scientifically does not support this. And from this, a lot of things change, right? So if we understand that man is naturally social, well, those things that would be specifically antisocial, that we don't view as being wrong under liberalism, because of liberalism's overriding goal for freedom, well, actually, it turns out that freedom isn't the highest value. And actually, freedom, viewed from another lens, is actually a punishment.
But to me, this is like, we're kind of conflating what an individual should be striving for and what a government should be striving for. Like, an individual's highest value shouldn't be freedom. I would agree with that. But maybe a government's highest value should be protecting the freedom of its citizens.
Well, I mean, what does that mean?
It means so. What do you mean? What does it mean? It means so that's in order to stop having an authoritarian government basically take over everything. It has to be built on freedom being a primary value for it. But like you as an individual, you shouldn't be living. You as an individual shouldn't be living your life like freedom is your primary value, because then you're just going around fucking whoever you want. You're not creating a life for yourself. You're not going to settle down. You're not going to have children. You're not going to do anything that you're going to find long-term value in necessarily.
But tyranny was bad before liberalism.
Of
Right.
course.
Well, so we don't need to have freedom as a primary value to be adverse to tyranny.
No, but our governments might need that.
Well, why? Because again, tyranny was not good before liberalism.
Yeah, but we had a lot of tyrannical governments. So it's pretty hard to have non-tyrannical governments back in the day.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
What do you mean? Like, it's
I don't
pretty
know if
hard.
that's necessarily true. Like,
had-
there are,
Uh-huh.
well, I mean, like, no one thought that, like, Dark Ages England was a tyrannical place. Like, there's just no, like, no one accuses Charlemagne of being a tyrant. Right? Like,
I don't know
no one
enough about
accuses
Charlemagne to
Cyrus.
comment on that, but
Well, go and look it up. No one accuses Cyrus the Great of being a tyrant,
Mhm.
right? Like, but this guy's an emperor of a vast empire, but no one calls him a tyrant.
yeah, but if
He's-
if we have like single emperors or kings or whoever who are the magical just king who's not, who does things that we like, if it still has a system which allows the next king to come over and fuck it all up, it doesn't matter.
Sure. And so one thing that we've learned from liberalism is that constitutional rights are good,
Right.
right? So constitutional limits on government are a good thing. And that's true, right?
Right. And right. And
but-
that's based
but-
on the idea
but-
that freedom
but-
for the individual is a primary principle.
No, I don't think it has to be, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be, because then, okay, well, freedom from the individual from obligations to his fellow man.
Well, no, to
leaves
the
us-
from the government, not to
Yeah, but
each other.
the concept of freedom,
Mhm.
like in abstract, will be extended out to everything, because they'll be like, oh, well, my freedom's being infringed. It's like, well, I mean, I guess that's true, but at the end of the day, you should, have obligations to your parents.
But
you know?
that's the problem of just human existence, that we can't. There's not one universal solution for your private life, your family
Yeah,
life,
okay.
your
So
mind,
freedom
the
doesn't
government.
need to be the ultimate value of society.
Well, not
Right.
not for all of society. Of course, I agree with that.
Right. So okay. So we've now delegitimized the ultimate value of liberalism. Which is
No,
freedom.
it's for the government, not for all of society as a whole.
Well, no. The question is, like, what are we aiming at, right? And so if what we're aiming at is a society in which we understand that it's top to bottom
Mhm.
created and maintained by the people who live within it, which is true, right? That's
You mean bottom
You
and
know,
top?
well, either way, the
Mhm.
whole the as a three-dimensional thing, like, for each individual person within society, they all have a place in society, right?
Right.
They all have, like, they'll contribute in some way, where even if it's just by existing and living within the society, they're all part of it. They interact with one another, even if they're just buying food at the shop or something, right? That's
Mhm.
being a part of society. And so each one of those we think can be valuable, right? We want to value ourselves.
Sure.
And so now, okay, so what are we valuing? Well, how about our comfort in society? Like, how about how we feel about society? And if we're being tyrannized by the government, well, I don't feel very good about that. It's not about a sort of single thing. It can be our aesthetic feeling about things. I don't know. I'm not saying.
Yeah, but no one can
nonsense.
agree on aesthetic feeling. I mean, so
Right,
I guess.
I agree. I agree.
But so if we
Right.
remove freedom from the government's primary concern, like what do we replace that with? What does the government replace that with?
I'm not saying I have all the answers, right? I
Mhm.
mean, like, you could have decency, you can have propriety, you can have any number of other things that
I don't think those
essentially. Well, why not? Because the thing is, right?
because no one agrees on what decency means. Or...
But that's
It
good.
means saying
That's
people's
good.
pronouns, Sitch. I mean,
Ah,
that's the
obviously.
problem. Yeah.
does it though? That's the thing. And now we get into a negotiation, right?
Mhm.
And so now we have to accept that what has to happen is a good faith negotiation between two parties, or else society is going to break down, right? And so that's on the table now, right? Whereas before, in a social contract society, it could be that no one has to talk to another fucking person. They can just operate in silence according to a set series of rules, and that's not really a society at all.
But
And this is
we
the
don't-
problem with
I mean,
social contract societies in general.
Sure, but no one really operates according to if that's even true.
I don't know, man. I like you
Our
see.
government-
No.
Mhm.
Hang on. There's a great example of this, right? Like in New York, a woman got raped on the fucking train, just in full view of like 30 people, and everyone just sat there and watched it. And it's just like that's
Just recently, or is this like old?
yeah, it was
story?
recently. Yeah, that's a social contract society. Like literally, there's a video of her like screaming for help. No one's going to help. Not my fucking job.
I don't know
Social
what this has to do
contract.
with-
Call the
I don't know what
police.
this has to do
No,
with
but
the
that's
social
what
contract.
that's what a social contract society is, right? Where there is a set of
It's just-
rules, and if
that's
it's not good, if
horrible.
it's not, yeah, of course it's horrible.
Are you blaming that on liberalism? Please tell me you're not.
Yes, that is the consequence of the social contract
That's
as a
so-
concept.
How is that?
Right.
Like,
Because no one has a relational obligation to another. Whereas if that would never have happened in a feudal society, right? Where men had obligations as men to women as women. That would never have happened. The men would have been morally obligated
But wait,
to step in. But
would-
when
would-
we're all free, no one has any obligations like that on the other.
If
Well,
it
we
wasn't New
hire
York
pe-
City,
Yeah.
okay, if it was a smaller town, do you
Yes,
think
then-
that people would have interacted with that or tried to stop
Because
that?
they wouldn't be operating according to the social contract.
It has
They'd be
nothing to do with
operating-
social contract. It has to
It
do with
does.
how living in a large city fucks with people's brains.
No,
Well,
but even
and we
like go,
do-
go back 100 years, that would not have happened because it wouldn't have been the final form of the social contract
I
society.
don't think
But
that's
where we
true.
are now.
I think if you went back in time to some, large city that wasn't living in a liberal form of government, I'm sure there's all sorts of people getting stabbed and raped in the streets, and people are
Yeah,
like,
but-
whatever, not my problem.
No, I think this is a fairly modern phenomenon.
Okay,
man.
I don't
Like
know.
you can read accounts from history.
Mhm.
Like, it's just not always been this way. This is new, right? This is a new manifestation of the way
I'm very
things are.
skeptical of this, but
Okay, this is definitely new, and it's gross, and it's not wholesome, right? It's not a wholesome place to be, and is like I don't really want to live in a world where people are not obligated morally to one another. Right? That's not a society,
I agree with that, sure.
right? But that's where liberalism ends up, and so we have to avoid this problem. We need to accept that liberalism has done good, but it's done what it was supposed to do when it was supposed to do it. But now it's not capable of arriving at a place that it promised to go.
Liberalism doesn't force you to embed yourself into a community where you're responsible for other members of the community. But it
No,
doesn't
and it does
prevent
everything it can to.
it
well,
doesn't
does.
prevent you from doing that though.
It incentivizes you against it, though,
How?
because it creates the ability to live without other people's direct assistance.
Yeah, but that's someone's personal choice. It's not. It's
Yeah, but
not.
that's because freedom is the ultimate value to liberalism.
Well, individual rights are the ultimate value, but I would argue,
No, I think freedom is. I think individual
Individual.
rights are a means to an end.
well, individual. I think we're saying the same thing basically. Individual rights and freedom are. I mean, you have the freedom to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew. I don't know. You got. Sometimes they're very elitist about who they let be Jewish. So I don't know.
Sure, but what I'm saying though is that because liberalism has this, it's freedom is, I think, the ultimate goal of liberalism because of the historical circumstances from which liberalism was born. Now, what this means is that it's crafted for a time and a place to break social obligation, right? That was the point. And so liberalism fundamentally doesn't contain within it any kind of social obligation on a moral level. It has
I don't
the
disagree.
social contract. So you've got a system of rules, universal rules that everyone has to live by, but you've got no obligations outside of those.
But
on
if
a
you
moral
want-
framework.
But if
from
you wanted to be an
liberalism, that's a
Amish,
problem.
you could though. Like if you wanted to
Yeah, yeah,
embed
yeah.
yourself in
Yeah,
that
as long as-
community, you could.
Yes, but that means that liberalism can't craft the consequence of being Amish, right? It can't craft community,
It can't
So-
force it on you, but you can.
Right.
but it can't craft it either. All it
As
can do is facilitate the breakdown of it, right?
I want to give a fact check. Apparently, there are two different stories. There was a man recently on New York who tried to rape some woman on train. He was defeated by the New York train passengers. There was, however, a man in Philadelphia who sexually assaulted a woman on train, and everyone just kind of sat there.
Oh, it was sorry, I'm thinking of
It was
Philadelphia.
the
I thought it
dirty
was New York.
Phillies,
Mhm.
not the New Yorkers, defended.
I
the
apologize.
train.
You noble, knightly, manly New Yorkers. I
Thank you.
apologize. You know, but absolutely. But the thing is, no one on earth would say no. A man doesn't have a duty to intervene. Like every
Mhm.
fucking man in Philadelphia was watching that woman get sexually assaulted.
Yeah, I don't.
What a
like
piece of shit.
the
What a
well,
fucking piece
they
of shit.
said, yeah, I agree. I don't know how many. They refuse to tell how many people were on the train, but who were there. But I don't think the people that who didn't do anything, who turned their heads, when that happened, or there's a famous case that was in New York where the woman is like getting stabbed in the alleyway, and she turns, and no one, called the police or did anything.
Yeah, but that's different. Where people assume that someone else is doing something.
Sure. But I mean, it's the same, well, it's equivalent. It's not exactly the same, but just people, not helping their fellow citizens.
Well, no, that's assuming that someone else is helping. I can't remember.
I don't think they did assume anyone's helping. I think they just didn't care.
When I did A-level psychology, there was a thing, I can't remember the name of it now.
Diffusion of responsibility.
Yeah, it's where everyone assumes that someone else is calling the police, and so
sure.
calling the police.
Well, okay, I guess so. The train's a better example because obviously you can't hide behind the diffusion responsibility because everyone can see. Yeah, so
everyone can see no one's doing anything about this.
But I don't think that like the people who are not doing anything on the train, like they don't have this idea of the social contract or anything like that in their mind. They're just like, oh, they're unhappy, they're afraid, they don't like, they don't care. They're like, I'm not going to get hurt to protect someone else.
Yeah,
like those are the thoughts that are kind of weighing on them.
Selfishness.
But that's what the social contract looks like, though. That's it. Where I don't have an obligation to these people, therefore I'm going to do nothing. And if you this is what happens when freedom is the ultimate value. Like normally you would think you have an obligation because actually you're not ultimately free. You are not ultimately free. You have an obligation to people you don't know in some way, right? But this when you end up in literally freedom being the highest value and you live under the social contract in order to preserve your freedom. Well, my freedom is more important than this woman getting raped in front of my fucking eyes now. Mm-hmm. It's awful, and we've got to avoid this consequence, in my opinion.
I don't think this has anything to do with
it's absolutely consequences.
It is nothing.
But it is. You can say I don't.
I think it's a consequence of living in a large city, and it's just you got people who become very disassociated from everyone else.
It's not.
I don't know. It depends.
The New Yorkers had liberalism in their hearts, and that's why they intervened.
Nice.
Yeah.
It depends on you have to have the right collection of people or the wrong collection of people, I should say, at the wrong time that allow this to happen. It's not dependent on some overarching philosophical assumption of society.
It is actually though. What it's like. Think about it, right? So, what would liberalism have said? Where would the ought in you ought to help this woman come from liberalism?
Yeah, I'm looking at my list, and it's definitely not in there. It's definitely not. You're not under no obligation, but
exactly, I'm under no obligation.
Right,
and that's the problem with the social contract society.
You can put a little bit of an obligation under equal protection under the law because we hire police officers that are supposedly there to intervene and protect people.
But then it's the police officers.
Okay, so again, this is where I think the confusion is coming in because you're asking me under the liberal tenets of how a government acts or should act, how does that get an individual person who's not part of the government to stop someone from doing a crime? And I'm like, well, that doesn't even make the question itself doesn't even make sense.
No, where does the feeling of obligation that one should intervene if a crime is being committed in front of you?
What I'm saying is that you're using the rules that we think a government should abide by, and you're trying to equate this to how an individual should act in this moment. And I'm saying that doesn't make any sense to think of it that way. The individual's going to have different rules. They're not a government.
The government, right? The government's obligation obviously is to stop crime.
Right.
There is no government agent in this train. And so no one else feels that they have an obligation to stop the crime.
I don't see how you can point to liberalism and say, listen, this is liberalism's fault. I mean,
because why did the New Yorkers stop the person if they're all liberals?
Right.
Well, I don't agree that they are. Like, I think that the moral imperative here would be coming from something that's not liberalism. Like they would be.
I don't necessarily. Well, it depends. It depends if you think that defending other people's rights is part of liberalism.
But this isn't about rights, right?
What do you mean? Of course it is.
No one was like, I'm going to save this woman because her rights are in danger.
Did they go after the guy who did it?
What you're like? This guy is assaulting a woman.
Yeah,
and if you go to defend her, you're defending her rights to not be assaulted. To her own person, to her safety.
That's abstract. What they're defending is the fact that they don't want her to get physically assaulted, right? They're not
Sure,
like,
but I thought
her
that's what we're
rights.
doing. We're taking all this to the abstract philosophical level. I thought that was the entire point of this conversation.
Yeah, but I don't, not entirely. Like, it's not the. I don't think that when someone is defending a woman, I think they're not thinking my rights. You know, they're thinking what it is morally correct to do.
They're not thinking anything.
Not let a woman get raped.
They're not thinking anything. There's an emotion of anger that doesn't have a thought behind it. That's
So
just like intuition. It's just an intuition.
So, so it's not rational. So it's not a question of abstractions.
Of course.
Right.
But then there's no philosophy that has anything to do with any of this.
Right.
It's just a moral intuition.
No, it does. Right. Because what I'm saying is the social contract society is a rationalistic abstraction.
Actually,
right? But we want a society that's based on moral intuitions. We want a society where people think, oh, what right and wrong is they feel.
No, so okay. So
moral
also
intuitions
actually
can be wrong.
I take back what I said because it is based on the abstraction. Because if we live in a society that promotes liberal individual rights and having people not fuck with you, and you ingrain that in people's minds, which our liberal society has, then their moral intuitions are based off that. So yes, at the moment that a guy sees a woman being assaulted, he might not have the conscious thought of like, oh, her individual rights are being violated, so I have to protect her. But the moral intuition, the anger he feels, is based off of being indoctrinated into that belief of individual rights since he's a child.
I don't know, man. I think there's also a much more sort of human conception of the sanctity of a woman. I think a lot of people.
Sure, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that. As part of it.
Well, there we go.
Sure.
So this is not a rationalistic question of liberal rights. This is a question of what would my mother say if I stood by and I watched a woman get raped?
No, but we can't disassociate people's moral intuition. There are some moral intuitions that are biological in nature, and people are born with, regardless of what society they grow up in. I will agree with that. But we can't say that people don't form moral intuitions that are emotional based off of the rules that the society has been pushing upon them ever since they were born.
Yeah, I'm not saying they don't. But what I'm saying is this wasn't a rational calculation. It was an emotional.
But that's irrelevant to whether it's a rational calculation or not.
Well, no, I think it is. Because it's a rational calculation for people to watch a woman getting raped on the train and say, I'm not going to interfere. Not my business.
Right. But what I'm saying is
that's a rational calculation.
Yes. Well, maybe not. Because you could say if they're afraid or if they're anxious, these are not rational calculations.
You know, they must all have been like, yeah, I'm not going to look at anyone else. Because, like, come on. You know, you can't say that this isn't something they had to think about.
No. I'm saying if someone decides not to interact in a crime, I'm not saying you can't. It could be a rational calculation, or it could be most likely that there's an emotion of fear that I'm going to get hurt if I get involved in this thing.
It's possible, but I think that it's going to be people thinking, you know what, none of my business.
Right, but why are they thinking that in the first place? I don't think people.
The social contract. It's not that.
No, they're not because of the social contract.
No, but it is. They've got no moral obligation to one another.
I completely disagree. I think if you ask most people, you walk around the street and ask most people, like, oh, does a person have a moral obligation to defend someone or call the police if they're being attacked? They'll all say yes. They'll all say
okay. Yeah, they would. And then ask them, do you have a legal obligation? And they would say no. Yeah, because that's what the social contract.
Well, they wouldn't know the answer. Actually, no, they wouldn't know the answer to that. But
okay, but if they did know the answer, they would say no because they don't have a legal obligation, right? And so that's what they would say. If they knew anything about this, they would say, "No, I don't have a legal obligation," and so now I don't have to do it.
Yeah, but if they don't know that, why they're not operating under that idea?
Yes, that's right. If they don't know that, they're operating on their instinctive moral view rather than a sort of legalistic social contract view. But those who know they don't have a legal obligation to get involved don't get involved.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, when you go to school and we live in our liberal society, okay, we don't have our culture is not pushing on people the idea that, like, if you see someone being assaulted, you shouldn't do anything because you have no legal obligation. Like, we don't have TV shows, movies, schools. Nothing is pushing this idea. They're all like, you got to be the hero. Everyone else is going to stand around being like a schmuck, and you got to go in there and you got to fuck them up. That is the idea that our culture pushes on all of us. And part of that idea is based on this concept of, well, someone's having their individual rights being violated.
No, I don't know if it's about individual rights. I'm not convinced that it is.
Well, that's the framework that we view so many things in our liberal society is on this basis. But then, you're violating this person's rights.
Individual rights, property rights, bodily autonomy, like so many different things are being violated in this story.
But when you start framing it like this, like you say, okay, well, what's my obligation to get involved? And someone will say, well, nothing. because you don't have an obligation to get involved.
Well,
Well,
you're
the
saying you don't have
police
a legal
officers
obligation.
do have an obligation to
Yeah,
be
but I'm not a
involved.
police officer.
And-
Yeah, you're saying a legal obligation, not a moral obligation, not a societal obligation.
Exactly.
Which, first of all, I don't even know if that's.
But
it might be-
liberalism
I might-
can't give me a
I
moral
might be
obligation.
different. I don't know. I think that actually depends on their state. I'm pretty sure there are some states that have good Samaritan laws that you can't just
They-
like see someone being a victim of
Maybe.
a crime and do nothing. So
And that would be good because they're
Mhm.
illiberal. Like they're against your personal freedom. Good Samaritan laws,
Mhm.
right? Because your argument from liberalism can't compel you to put yourself in harm's way for someone else, right? So it's like,
Sure it can.
okay, what? How?
As I said, if we're all about respecting each other's individual rights, and you see someone not respecting someone's individual rights,
Yeah, but how is it my how is it my legal obligation to do it?
well, again, we're separating legal from moral, but
Yeah, but that's what the social contract is. It's a set of legal doctrines.
for the government,
But
we have
also
to
for
separate
the
the
society,
government from how
for you.
individuals should act morally. Lots of things are legal, but we wouldn't say that they're moral behaviors.
Yeah, I know, but that's the problem with the social contract society, right? We will allow a bunch of things that we consider to be immoral, such as standing by and watching a woman get raped, because we don't have a legal obligation. But the thing is, that the liberal order can't compel you to have a legal obligation. In fact, it would compel you against it. It would say, you've got
Of
to wait for the
course,
government. Or
because of individual rights. Exactly.
Yeah, but I would
yeah,
assume
exactly.
I would assume you wouldn't want to have a society that doesn't separate all the time moral and legal rights, moral and legal principles. Like, for example,
What?
cheating on someone is immoral, but I don't think that should be a fucking crime. I don't think you should go to jail for cheating on somebody.
Okay, why not?
Yeah, why
Because
not?
That's ridiculous. What do you mean?
Why? Why is that ridiculous?
Because I don't see why that should be
Capital
anything to do with
punishment.
the law of the government
Well,
whatsoever.
because you're literally destroying relationships.
So that's your choice as an individual.
Okay, well there we go. Why should I be compelled to help the woman who's being raped?
Well, you shouldn't. I don't know if you should legally. I think you
Right.
should morally.
Okay, but why should I care?
We're kind of going in circles, guys, here. And
no.
Septikai
Hang on,
Sushi
what-
has
What do
a
you mean?
Why
Why
should I
should you
care?
care?
Oh, you've got a moral obligation to do this. Yeah, but I don't have a legal obligation to do it, so I'm not
Right.
gonna.
Okay. Well, that's
And
your
so fuck
choice.
your
I mean, I
moral
think that
obligation.
makes you an immoral person.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter, right? Because this is a social contract society. Your opinion on me doesn't matter because we're not really part of the same society, right? But all we do is live in the same area and abide by the same rules. Your moral judgments on me hold no weight.
that's
the
not
problem.
that's not even remotely true. That's the whole problem with cancel culture.
Well,
People get
well, no-
shunned from the public.
This is why these people are winning because they're not liberal, right? If we
Yeah,
this is
you're
where
right.
this
That's
is
the
where I
problem. That's why we're
lose.
fighting
Yeah,
against
this
it,
is
'cause
where
they're
I
not
lose my
liberal.
mind every time you say that. You're like, I'm going to defend liberalism by crapping all over it.
No, I'm not. What I'm saying, right, is that liberalism has run its course. Right.
Oh.
So clinging to something that's run its course is kind of a waste of time when loads of people are operating in ways that are not liberal, and we can't stop them operating in ways that are not liberal. Right. And so-
Where's the
okay,
course? Look ahead down the road and tell us where we're going.
Well, I mean, honestly, it looks like we're heading into a tyranny because of a commitment to a liberal order that no longer
And
exists.
there's no brakes on this car. We can't turn around or.
Yeah, we can. We can change, but we
Okay.
essentially have to accept that liberalism is finished,
Okay.
and we need to
So
look
no
at the
more-
next thing.
No more
And so the
liberalism. The bridge is burning behind us, and we're headed towards tyranny. So
Yeah.
what are our options here?
The options are to change the way we think about politics and society in order to avoid this tyranny. Right? Tyranny isn't
Okay.
inevitable, and
Well,
so
we have to
one way-
reconstruct something better than liberalism.
Yeah. I
Okay.
think whatever comes after liberalism.
But we're
Uh,
going to get rid of individual rights because obviously that leads to rapes on the subway.
Maybe
Okay, so no
if it
individual
does, and
rights.
it seems to. And
what about freedom of speech? Are we
hang
keeping
on a
that
second.
or no?
Hang on a second. If individual rights are predicated on the idea of a kind of fundamental equality, then then basically you're going to have to agree with Black Lives Matter eventually.
So equal protection under the law, we're getting rid of that because that's the equality
We don't
part,
have that.
right?
You don't have that.
Okay, so we already don't have it, so we don't
That's already
need
a
to get
fiction.
rid of it.
Yeah.
Okay. Septikai Sushi promised that they would be nice to me if I read their super chat. for at least a month.
Sure.
So Septikai Sushi for $5 says people in New York not intervening has nothing to do with freedom. It's due to Democrat weapon laws. Liberals are to blame for that. So that's actually an argument I can understand.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. But I think it does also have to do with a lack of moral conscience because of the social contract society.
Can you imagine if everyone in that subway pulled out a gun and like shot it?
Yeah, I mean, they should. They fucking should. Like someone, like you see a woman getting sexually assaulted in the subway, the appropriate thing to do is draw your weapon and shoot the assaulter.
Yeah. Someone in the chat said something I want to address, which is they said Carl is saying that liberalism by its nature erodes social responsibility and obligations, that we need social responsibility and obligations.
Yes.
And I understand that's what you're saying. And what my argument is, and what I think where the problem comes from, is that America, under the liberal principles that we've had since our foundation, had all these social responsibilities and obligations and blah blah blah, and some of them were embedded in liberalism and some of them were not embedded in liberalism. They're embedded in Christianity, they're embedded in social conservatism and all sorts of other ideas. And the problem that I keep pointing to is that when we had the boomers completely lose faith with the older generation, they started deconstructing everything. And some of the things needed to be deconstructed and some of the things didn't need to be deconstructed. And I don't see, to me, that is really the root of the problem. Liberalism isn't the root of the problem. It's just liberalism is the last thing left standing to be deconstructed. And I think that's the problem, is that you're pointing to liberalism and saying, see, this caused this. And it's like, well, no, that's just the last institution that's still standing after they deconstructed everything else.
I think it might have caused it. The problem with English liberalism is that it presupposed that everyone would be a Christian.
Mm-hmm. And that's definitely part of it. Well, not Christian, but just like believing in God. No,
explicitly, it was assumed they'd be Christian and hold Christian values, right? They wouldn't be appropriate for.
I thought
Jewish
John Locke was pretty okay for
Islamic
non-Jews and non-Christians. As long as they had a belief in God, he was okay with it.
Yeah, but really, they mean Christian.
Okay.
No, they really do. Like, because there are certain assumptions on how you're going to treat your fellow man, regardless of his race or religion and things like that underpin all of this. That, frankly, Judaism is a very parochial religion, right? It doesn't hold those assumptions of universality. Same with Islam. It doesn't hold the same assumptions.
It kind of does.
No, I don't.
Well, within its own tribe, I guess.
Exactly, that's parochial.
Yeah. Sure,
it's not universal, right? Okay. So this is one of the reasons that Nietzsche loved Judaism. He thought we should be parochial like Jews. But so it really is one of those things where liberalism will work long term in a deeply Christian society. Without that, it won't. And so without that, it takes over and becomes only the social contract, right? And so that is the sole source of your obligation, which is no obligation at all other than to follow the law.
Yeah, but so the issue isn't liberalism. The issue is that it's just something missing, and that you can't lean on liberalism to fill the void of everything, which I would probably agree with that.
Sure, but then you essentially have to say, well, okay, we'll become Christians or we'll stop being liberals.
Well, it doesn't have to be Christianity. It could be anything. No, it has to be something else to fill that void.
No, I think it has to be the sort of Christian universalism has to underpin it, really, because there's a reason that liberalism came out of Christianity and not out of Islam, right? It works on Christian assumptions, and if you don't have those, then you don't have a functioning liberal society.
Yeah, but why? I don't know what.
Does that mean you're going to believe the Jesus story, Sargon? If that's the case,
no,
you kind of have
I told
to.
you. I think that liberalism's dead.
Right, but if you're saying Christianity is the thing that's going to supplant it, then, and you don't believe in the origin of Christianity.
Christianity is the substrate upon which liberalism rested, and Christianity withered and died, and so that's why liberalism is collapsing in on itself. And so, without Christianity to be the sort of social conscience of liberalism can't survive, and so we're living in this sort of like zombie liberal order.
I just feel like that's a different argument.
What do you mean?
You were saying that we need something supplemental with liberalism, which maybe we do.
No, we need Christianity to be supplemental to liberalism. But we're not going to get that back. We're not going to get that back.
Nova Leon for $5 says, Sargon, how can you say liberalism has run its course and isn't working when we've been living in a liberal society for decades?
Because our society is currently in the middle of a collapse.
Well, because we've lost the supplemental
Liberalism.
Well, we've lost the
we've lost
supplemental
Christianity.
things like Christianity or whatever else was bolstering up our society.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm trying to say is
Christianity contained all of the moral obligations that lay outside of the law, right? And now they're gone. And now we've got pride parades where people are being, wildly degenerate in front of children and shit like this. That liberalism permits that. Liberalism permits that because it doesn't have a moral conscience.
yeah, but this
that
goes
can
to what I
resist
was
it.
saying. There's not going to be, and I think this is where the neo-reactionaries fall into all the well of troubles here. You're not going to have or we shouldn't have, one bullet that solves all problems. There's not going to be one universal answer.
Mhm.
You are going to need something that your government runs off of, or you need something that your society and your family runs off of, that your local community runs off of. And it seems like this is what I'm saying, is that in the 60s, we sort of deconstructed everything except for what our government runs on, and that's all we're left with. And that's the issue. You're not going to be able to create a post-liberal philosophy that can fill the void of everything at the same time.
Yeah, I'm not saying we necessarily have to, but what I'm saying is without the Christian substrate that liberalism rested on, then we're on a doomed course, right? We can't really escape the position we're on, because if the only thing we have left is quote unquote freedom and the social contract, well, that goes to degenerate pride parades, and no one really wants that, but there's no getting around it. Right, and so it's like, right, okay, so what do we do?
Obviously,
And
some
so
people want it.
Well, yeah, fair enough. Some people do want it, but people who are moral, who believe in something that I would consider to be morality, don't want that, right? And so the question is, what do we do? Unless we're okay with them sexualizing children, and
No, I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I don't think that the thing that we create should be done in the framework of the government.
Well, it'd be a moral framework, right?
Right, yeah, exactly. It should be a moral framework. It shouldn't be a government framework. It shouldn't be a legal framework.
So it's got to take the place of Christianity.
Yeah,
but it will.
sure.
But it will translate into a legal framework. All moral frameworks translate into legal frameworks.
I don't think it has to. No, there's lots of parts of, even though we had a lot of Christian morality in our country, huge swaths of Christian morality were not embedded in the legal framework, and were actually explicitly the legal framework denied.
Sure, but laws aren't untethered to morality, right?
No, I understand that, but I'm saying they don't have to. It doesn't have to be a one for. It's not.
I'm not.
Our
saying it has
system
to be
was never a
one.
one-for-one overlap
No,
with
I'm not
Christianity.
saying it has to be.
Right.
But what I'm saying is that there's not going to be a legal system that has no connection to the social morality.
Yeah, well, obviously.
Well, it's not necessarily actually obvious,
Well, okay, I think it's obvious, but
Yeah,
okay.
but that's the point, though, right? So there will be something that has to replace that, or we get drag queen story time forever.
Oh my God. Can't you just advocate against drag queen story time within the liberal
On what
framework
grounds?
like everyone else?
It's my personal freedom.
On the grounds that you're going to ruin the children. I don't know,
Yeah,
on
but
Christian,
your
whatever
view of
grounds you
ruining-
want to argue on.
Yeah, but your view of ruining children is not based in the liberal order.
Do you
right?
think
it's based
when
on a
people
conservative view of human nature?
Do you think when people sit back and argue for whatever policy prescription they want, they consider what other people will agree to? But like,
Why shouldn't they?
Well, a lot of people don't. A lot of people obviously argue from inside their moral framework without any consciousness that this isn't persuasive to other people. They do it all the time.
Isn't that just a terrible evil, though?
No, but it can't be
symptomatic
avoided.
of our age.
It can't be avoided.
Of course it can.
How? The only
Having
way it can be
consideration
avoided.
for the other people as your fellow fucking countrymen.
Well,
having
having
positive sentiments to the people
that's what
around
that
you.
is
supposed to be
liberalism.
based on,
That is
people.
tolerance of conflicting
No,
beliefs.
it's
Number
not.
5.
That's tribalism. Right, that's literally like.
Wait,
Well,
how is
how is-
having tolerance of people that disagree with you tribalism? That's
Yeah.
No,
anti-tribalism.
I didn't say tolerance. I said positive sentiments.
Oh, okay.
Right?
But that's
As in,
how
view
you
them as
foster
your
tolerance.
countrymen.
Yes, I understand.
No,
that.
not at all. You can be tolerant of people you fucking hate. I'm tolerant of people I fucking hate every day of my life.
Not on when it comes to the pride stuff. Obviously, you're like, no, we need liberalism's
I'm
dead. We need to
totally
completely
tolerant of it.
restuck.
I'm
need to
not going out there
restructure
and
society.
bombing them or anything.
Well, you are
I'm-
advocating for a society where
yeah, but that's not
a complete
intolerance.
restructuring of society.
No,
Aren't
I'm not
you?
saying that we should. No,
Okay.
I don't think a complete restructuring is an accurate way of describing what I'm arguing. But also, I am tolerant of it. I don't go out and do anything about it. Like these
Mm-hmm.
people apparently have a right to do that, and therefore I've got to just watch them do it. You know, but I can speak about it.
Well, you
thankfully.
don't have to go
now.
to the pride parade. You can
And I don't.
stay away. And
Sure, but that doesn't mean that I don't live in a society that has pride parades with naked people flaunting their sexuality in front of children.
yeah,
There's a part
well,
of me that
I mean,
thinks
I
that's
would
probably
argue.
wrong.
I think there's ways that we can argue against that within a liberal framework, and people are doing that without saying. I mean, it's not persuasive to come out and say liberalism is what led us to this kind of sexualizing of children, and therefore
how
we have to
you
get
argue
rid of
against it
liberalism.
from liberalism.
The defense of people being nude at pride parades is entirely anti-liberal, because the liberal says, wait a minute, we don't let straight people run around flashing children. And then the woke person says, well, that gay or trans person is been marginalized and is an oppressed person, so therefore because of their group orientation they get
Right. It's
different
anti-liberal.
rights. Yeah, I mean the whole thing's based on the anti-liberal principle.
But the problem is that liberalism is materialistic philososophy. Right.
We
What does
keep
that have to
jumping.
do-
We keep
okay.
jumping
Wait,
around.
what
It's
does
like
that
a
have to do with-
huge.
Wait, what does that have to do
I'll
with
tell
what?
you what that
That's
has to do.
Okay, tell me,
giant.
tell me.
I'll tell you what that has
Tell
to
me.
do with it if you just stop talking, because what you're appealing to with, say, the non-sexualization of children is the innocence and sanctity of them as children.
No, I'm not appealing to any of that at all. I just said
Okay, what are you
under
appealing
our
to?
laws, straight people cannot run around flashing children. Why
Why
does
not?
that not apply to gay people or trans people at pride
Yeah, but-
parades?
What's the reason for that?
But that's irrelevant to the argument right now.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is, because they're not arguing on a foundation that it's okay to sexualize children. They're arguing
They
on a foundation of marginalized people get some sort of different rules applied
Yes.
to them, which is inherently
literally-
anti-liberal.
They say,
Breaking the
where's the
liberal
harm?
rules.
They literally say, well, I'm not harming the child by exposing them to this. Like they do not consider if it's not
They say
physical
no. They say that
violence.
about. They try to say that about drag queens. They don't try to say that about nudity. But
They absolutely say about pride and nudity. I've seen the arguments.
I
But
mean, I'm sure someone somewhere is saying it. I don't think that's the mainstream argument that's being made to defend
Well,
this stuff. But
I see it all the time being made. It's like, it's
Okay.
good for them. It's just about freedom. It's just about, like, there's nothing wrong with it. And it's like, okay, well then from a materialistic point of view, do you argue there's something wrong with it?
easily you
Like,
bring
because-
up, you say, okay, well, we've actually done lots of studies about sexualizing children, and they all show that it leads to bad outcomes. That's,
Yeah.
that's the
Well, where are they?
material.
Where are the
You want me to
studies?
pull them up?
Yeah,
They've
yeah, I
been
do.
done to death. There's like a million of these studies. Someone, I think
Like,
it was,
I
I think it was
agree
Chris
with you.
Rufo, like posted a shit ton of them on Twitter like a few weeks ago. Or something.
Okay, well, it turns out they're not persuasive then, doesn't it?
Well, no,
They
they
are
don't care about them.
persuasive
They're
to
not-
many people.
Exactly.
They're not
They
looking
don't
because
care.
they don't care about materialism. They don't care about studies. It's all
No.
ideology.
But the ideology is materialist.
No,
Right?
it's not.
Yes, it is.
The
Liberalism-
ideology is
Oh,
we need
come
to
on,
destroy everything that's normative. That's the ideology.
liberalism itself is a materialist ideology.
I understand that, but they're not.
Christianity is the idealist aspect.
The woke
that is
people,
missing.
the woke people, which you agree with, are not operating under a liberal frame. They're trying to
Yes.
deconstruct and subvert it. Okay,
They are
so they're
also
not making
materialists.
arguments based on the liberal frame when they talk about what they're talking about.
No, but they make arguments within liberalism's materialist dogma, right? And so it's like that. You can't argue for metaphysics within liberalism. It doesn't work.
Yeah, but
right? It doesn't
as I
make any
said,
sense.
you can there's very easy materialistic reasons why sexualizing children is bad. And they don't
It
care
is.
about that because they don't really care about those reasons.
Right.
Because they
So
are
it-
arguing from a point of ideology.
Yeah, okay, but they don't care, right? Right. So the point is, it's the question of the alignment of their values, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, okay, well, we need to make a value argument. If they don't care about the harm, then you need to make an argument of values. And okay,
But that's not
one
why people don't. So we have to separate the individuals who are promoting the behavior versus so we'll use your train rape example because I think it's actually a good example. You have the drag queen story time pride parade person flashing children on the train, and you're saying, oh, liberal society's looking the other way on the train, right? They're ignoring that this is happening. No one's intervening. But the reason for that isn't because of something about social contract theory or anything about the materialism of liberalism. It's because we're so mired in tribalism that no one on the left dares to give anyone on the right any ammunition to point to something and say this is a problem, out of fear that then the right will attack them and say, oh, this is what the liberal Democrats want. They want this in society. And by acknowledging any part of it, they give a win to the right. And that's what's motivating people.
Why aren't the Democrats outraged about it like the Republicans?
Because they say it's not a, this is the argument. They say, we don't like that, but that's not a big deal.
No, but
that happened one time.
I don't think they care, right? It doesn't outrage their moral sensibilities.
Some of them, but I think most
if it was some guy yelling the N-word, right, they would be outraged. So it's not that they would just ignore something because they ignore everything or anything like that. It's because this
ignore, but it's because that's the tool. No, this is very cynical, especially from a top-down level. The left is going to point to someone shouting the N-word because they think it justifies them in their worldview and gaining more political power.
Right.
And they're going to ignore a LGBT person, flashing a child because they think it hurts their political power. And it's the exact same thing with the right. They're going to ignore someone shouting the N-word and they're going to fixate on the person flashing the child.
But that's only because their worldview is not incensed by the sexualization of children.
No, it has nothing to do with that. Okay,
of course,
wait, do you think someone on the
with?
right is not angry if a white person is shouting the N-word at an innocent black person?
I think
just minding their
care,
business.
Yeah.
Do you think they care about that?
Not particularly. I imagine.
Oh, so they don't care. Okay, so they're fine with everyone being
I'm not saying
racist.
they like it, but I'm saying that they don't. It doesn't inflame their moral sensibilities like it would a liberal or a leftist, right?
So when people were calling Clarence Thomas the N-word, what do you mean? That people were like, well, look at this shit. People were very incensed about this.
Yeah, no, people were like, pointing out from a partisan position as in saying, well, look, this is you being hypocrites, blah, 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 blah. But like, I don't think that they were sat there in bed that night, grinding their teeth, going, I can't believe those liberals called him the N-word. I don't think a single Republican spent any time thinking about this after the event had happened.
I don't think you're giving them... I think you're kind of hurting the Republican argument because this is a huge part of the Republican position against CRT is that it's racist and it's racist against white people. And if they're grinding their teeth out of racism against white people, but ignoring racism against black people, then that's basically buying into the left's argument that they're just racist.
I just don't think any Republicans were grinding their teeth over left-wingers calling Clarence Thomas the N-word. But
do you think they're grinding their teeth over CRT being racist against white people being taught in schools to their children?
Yeah, because they are the classical liberals Adam's thinking of when they're like, well, it's unequal treatment, right? Someone saying something to someone, they view that as just a fact of life, right? So yeah, some people are going to be racist on the internet. That's a fact of life, right? That's just a thing that you encounter and you live with it, right? That's how they view that. They're not sat there like crying in bed, going, "There are some racists on the internet," but the left are.
Then why?
But they are sat there crying in bed over the fact that there are a bunch of pedo drag queens out there. That actually really inflames their moral sensibilities.
They're not crying in bed that someone got called the N-word because it doesn't serve the political interests.
I think that's too cynical.
That's exactly what's happening. Why they're going to cry in bed over someone burning the American flag? Oh my God, this should be illegal.
Yeah, there are going to be some, but I think there are more who are crying in bed over drag queen story time because this is a never event to them, right? It should never be the case that happens. But to calling Clarence Thomas the N-word, well, they're going to be like, well, yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's rude. That's horrible.
No,
but they're going to be like, yeah, that happens.
There's very few people on the left, okay? There's some of them. There's very few people on the left that are part of mainstream Democrats who want to see children be sexualized or children have, a trans person, shaking their genitals in their fucking face. There's very few people that want that. So what they do is they downplay it and they say, that doesn't happen. The right is just blowing it up and blowing this out of proportion because they want to take rights away from gay people. That's what, if you've ever talked to someone on the left, that's what they say when you ask them this question.
Yeah, but they just don't care though. Right?
It's not that they don't care. They don't think it's happening. It's the same thing if you talk to someone on the right and you say, what about the cops murdering, black people? What about racist cops murdering black people? And they're like, I don't think that's happening. It's not that they're not incensed by the idea of it. They deny that it's happening or happening on a scale that's important.
Yeah, but even if you give them like an individual example, they just say, yeah, I don't agree with that. But
Yeah,
that
exactly.
doesn't bother them, right?
It does.
So
No, it does bother.
No, but it doesn't, though. It doesn't keep them up at night. Like, it's not
they
a
don't
never
think it's
event.
because they
right?
don't think it's happening
No,
enough.
but
to
even
matter.
when you show them the one example,
yeah,
you
they say,
"Look."
"Oh, that." They say that's really bad. I don't support that. I don't think that's indicative
and
of
then
the
they
whole.
fucking forget about it. Just like when the Republicans
Just like someone on the
presented
right. So if you have some instance of a white cop being super ultra racist and he brutally murders a black guy, okay, someone on the right's not going to be thinking up at night seething about that.
yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's exactly.
But that's not because they don't think it's wrong. It's because they just don't think it's indicative of the broader society, of the broader trends of society.
And it's because it doesn't incense their moral sensibility.
No, it's because it doesn't serve the political narrative that they need to
agree.
operate to gain political power in our society.
I don't really agree with that. But anyway, it's coming on midnight, so I'm going to have to go.
Fair enough.
One more thing, before you go.
All right,
CT was, and many people in the chat were really, they wanted to speak out for the millennials. They said a lot of millennials are not having kids not because they're selfish and want their own time. They don't have the income to support a family, and they don't have a home to raise the kid. And I personally, we need to build more fucking houses. Houses need to be like Big Macs, not like.
No, you need to stop immigration.
Oh my God.
You're building houses for foreigners.
Oh
Why
my
should you
God.
spend your money
Okay.
building houses for foreigners?
Oh, well, okay. I was going to try to end on a happy note.
There's no happy note.
Carl.
We're in
Carl,
civilizational
Carl,
collapse. at this
Okay.
point.
Carl, you're right. We shouldn't build any more houses. We should just, because of immigration, CT, I'm sorry. I'm very sorry, but you're never going to own a home. Okay.
Well, okay. For example,
Can we build
America-
houses for Americans at least? I mean, geez.
You don't need to. The fertility rate in America is 1.7 births per
Oh
woman.
my God.
Right? You need a 2.1 birth per woman
Please,
to have a
please.
replacement rate. So you are definitionally not building
Carl,
houses for Americans.
I forbid you to take any more black pills, okay?
But it's just true.
Listen.
It's just a truth that we're doing the same in England.
Okay.
We're building like hundreds of thousands of houses every year. For
Immigration.
foreigners.
Wait a second. Immigration is a completely different thing in England than it is in America, okay?
Not
you
really.
guys, like half your population is immigrants. It's not like that in America, okay?
We have
a
it's
tiny-
worse in America.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
In America, you're something like 65% Americans and like 35% foreigners. We're 25% foreigners. It is worse in America.
Okay. We got a lot more room, though. You guys are living on Rhode Island over there.
Your infrastructure is limited, unless you're going to just keep building infrastructure for foreigners.
I don't want to. Do we? Okay.
But anyway, like I don't want to go off on a different tangent, but
Right.
honestly, we're
do you
fucked.
do you understand though? It's not. People would like. There are a lot of people that would like to have kids and can't because they don't have the financial means to do it.
No, it's
So.
a total cop. What it is, they think that they will
Look
be
at
able to.
Daddy
They
Sargon
don't want to.
coming
They don't
in
want to give
here.
up their lifestyles. That's what it is. Like, and you don't spend money on the things that you thought you would spend money on when you become a parent. You don't want to do the things that you used to do because you have other responsibilities, and you want to do those things because they're satisfying, they're life affirming, they give you meaning and purpose. Like this, this is bollocks, but it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, if you don't have children, your civilization collapses,
Right.
and you're not having children, so you're going to reap the reward.
So do you think baby slave is a better term for woman than birthing person? I'm curious.
I think we could go for something a little more offensive. Baby slave it's got the problem is baby, right? Because babies are cute and adorable,
Yeah. Oh,
and
it's
so that's
true.
half
Yeah.
good.
And the baby
So,
might be the slave, so it's kind of
so how about-
confusing
yeah,
as
exactly.
well. So
Sort of parasite slave or something like that would
Okay.
be something.
All right.
If you want to truly dig the knife into the poor
But like,
women who can't
how
get
about like
abortions.
fetal receptacle factory or something like that? That's a good one.
anyway, we do thank
Something
you for
like
coming on. It was an interesting
no,
discussion.
thanks.
So
Yeah,
Mhm.
but just think about what I've been saying, right? 'Cause
right.
I really wish, like, I don't want this to be the case, right? I don't want any of this to be the case. I would like to be the 2015 liberal that I was, and in my heart of hearts, still am, as convictions go. But the problem is, you have to face the reality. And the reality is that these people are right with their critiques of liberalism, and we are seeing them reap the rewards of those critiques at our expense. And if we continue going on like this, well, we're on a downward slope. And we've got to do something to change. It's not pleasant, but we have to change. So we've got to think about it. And I'm not saying I've got the answers either, or anything like that. But
Yeah, well, just go the same route as the commies. They don't have the answers either. They just want to tear down society, and they figure it'll just, reformulate
well, wait,
itself.
Let me ask one question, which you can give a short answer, and there'll be no debate about. It's just, do you think that most individual people they have an opinion about something based off of their principles? Like they see a news story and then they go, what are my principles on this? Or do you think that they just have a reaction based on what their team assignment is, and their opinions really kind of assigned to them from, the higher ups?
I mean, now it's definitely about partisan team play,
Mm-hmm.
but it used to be about the interests of your local community.
Okay.
And I think it was better when it was the interest of the local community, because this is non-social contract, right? This is you considering yourself to belong somewhere and to have moral obligations to the people around whom you live. And that was actually good. So
there you go.
That was wholesome, and was like, but that's the sort of product of sort of like the Christian local community view. And again, I don't know if we can even get it back. I don't know if it's possible.
I'll ask Carl the POV question next time when he has more time.
Yeah, okay. But I'm going to write another article, 5 further false assumptions.
Okay.
Which by the people, for the people, the very concept of the social contract, which is nonsense, political consent, democracy itself, and property rights.
You got to write an article on what to replace it with.
That's a big question, though.
I know. Well,
yeah, well, that is the question.
Yeah, I mean, like the property rights one is actually really interesting, because like John Locke's like, oh well, property rights are intrinsic to us. It's like, no, property rights are actually extrinsic. They property rights occur in other people's heads. Like, they don't occur in your own head. Like, you don't.
Well, I mean, I think when you write your article, you have to lay out that the context for this is all about, John Locke and other people are attacking divine right of kings, but still maintaining that God is basically granting people these rights.
Yeah. Yeah, there is that. But anyway, I've got to go.
See you later.
Speak to you later, guys. Bye.
Take care. All right. Now we can talk shit. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Obviously. I think meritocracy is missing out on my thing.
I think my fundamental point still stands. And I think it's what isn't addressed is that there's not going to be a one catch-all idea that is going to work for how the government should operate, how families should operate, how smaller communities should operate. Like, we need different ideas of how each grouping of humans interact with each other. And I think the fundamental flaw in the way that this is being perceived is what I said, that in the 60s, we started, or the left really, because they lost faith in the older generation, started deconstructing basically everything: how parents should interact with children, how families should interact, how smaller communities should interact, how towns should interact, how cities should interact. They started deconstructing all the various ways in which groups of people interact with each other. And they tried to get rid of a lot of them. And a lot of those things were based on Christianity directly, or more indirect, Christian principles or Judeo-Christian principles, or whatever you want to call them.
How is what
but all that's left? All that's left after they've deconstructed everything is liberalism, and the reason that that's all that's left is because that is literally the legal framework of our government, and it can't be something that's just philosophically deconstructed because it's embedded in law. And then the problem is that people then say, oh, well, we are living in a society that has all these problems. We have this liberal legal framework, therefore that's the problem. It's the liberal legal framework that's creating the problem. And I'm like, no, that you have basically, I think Carl and everyone who's like kind of a neo-reactionary, but Carl's not a neo-reactionary, but like people that are criticizing liberalism, they have survivor's bias. Liberalism is the survivor. It's the thing that's survived so far. And so they think that's what the problem is. And it's like, no, that's just what's the last thing standing. you think the last pillar standing from the deconstruction crowd is the problem when it's no. It's the deconstruction crowd, and they've deconstructed all of the other pillars our society was based upon. That's the actual problem.
How is what Carl doing anything different than the deconstructionist crowd, though? That's my question.
Well, it is very similar. He just wants to reconstruct something that he thinks it sounds like he wants to reconstruct a bunch of pillars of society that will be immune to the deconstruction crowd. And
I asked him specifically about that, and he said no.
Well, he said he doesn't know what there will be. And this is where
I asked him specifically if he believed that there was some super system that would be impervious to deconstruction. And he said no, he didn't believe there was one.
But that's part of the problem is what his argument is, because he's on one hand saying that the fundamental assumptions of liberalism are flawed in such a way that they allow, neo-Marxian deconstruction. But then on the other hand, also saying, well, everything can be deconstructed to some degree. So it's kind of like, well, then what's the point of restarting everything? Because then whatever you create, whatever new thing you use to supplant liberalism,
it's just going to be deconstructed in the same way.
Even if it's maybe it's even if it's deconstructed in a different way, maybe it will be deconstructed in a somewhat different way, but it could still lead to some horrible outcome you don't like.
It's like saying human beings are flawed because when you dump acid on them, they melt. We have to find a human being that is not going to melt under acid. It's like, why?
Well, it's like we wouldn't need government if men were angels. But men are not angels, so obviously we need government. And it's the human element here is the thing that causes the problem with any of these philosophies. Christianity, some religious person could create like the most, the best, greatest philosophy that everyone lives, if everyone followed, they would live according to, but they won't, because humans are flawed creatures and they'll start twisting things, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and things will get, degraded over time.
There is no acid-proof moral system, though. Right. I mean, it's just impossible.
I mean, that's why I agree with, James Lindsay had a really good video I wish he had made public that was on his private
that Patreon. It takes work to sustain. He was talking about how liberalism is basically like it's like a knife that you're balancing in your palm, and it keeps shifting, and you have to keep moving your hand to make it not fall over. But then as soon as you want to
but the problem is if you want to create a society or a government or a philosophy that doesn't require you to constantly move your hand to balance, the only solution to that is authoritarianism.
But as soon as you come out and you say, listen, like, for example, in your example, balancing is the goal, right? Just to keep it upright. As soon as you come out and say, okay, this is the goal of society, to maximize human flourishing for the most number of people, they're like, then you just picked a value, dude. You can't do that. It's like, what the fuck? Why are we even having this conversation? This is ridiculous.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if regarding Carl specifically, I don't think that would be his retort.
It was his retort.
Was it? Well, no, because
Look, I said, listen, I want to maximize human freedom, human happiness. Well, happiness, those are values. You can't do that. I'm just looking at it scientifically. It's like, what the fuck? It's so frustrating. But that's because
what he's trying to get at is that he wants there to be some a priority assumption of society that everyone agrees upon is the goal.
Let's read.
And it has to be based in something. And the problem, and which
it has to be based in truth, not just something. It has to be tangibly, materialistically. But materialism,
he wants it to be based. Yes, he wants.
But materialism is the problem. I see. There's so many contradictions here.
That is somewhat of a contradiction. Yeah, I guess
it has to be based in material, factual truth. But materialism is the problem. Okay.
Yeah, but that's why I asked him. I said, How do we judge whether an a priori idea is good or correct?
There's a bunch of super chats, so we should just read super chats.
I don't know.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like what you heard, you can listen to our live show right here on this channel on Sunday, starting at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern. And if you want, you can super chat us. We read $20 and up super chats on the show and then do a follow-up stream on the following Tuesday where we read the rest of the unread super chats and interact with fans of the show. Subscribe to this channel right here to listen to the live show or to listen to more of our awesome clips.